The white-haired man asks if the lady is offering to sleep in the same bed with the girl who may have come for his soul. He tells Nadia Balazit not to be mistaken, as he will never have anything to do with Balazit's daughter. The guy angrily tells the lady this, and then leaves, slamming the door. Nadia tells Glenn to wait. It's hard and painful for a pampered child to hear such cold words, but for the main character, it's a great joy. She was so happy. The girl thanked the Marquise and asked him to keep his word. Nadia was the illegitimate child of the Balazit family, and she led a very private life. The girl's sister took out all her anger and pain on her. The woman constantly mocked and humiliated her. Her father constantly told her that she was doing all this for the family. His daughter was his puppet, whom he used in every way for the sake of the family. Her fiancé had a hand in her death. God must have also deemed her life pathetic, for when the lady opened her eyes again, she was transported back to one of those days when she was 20. The girls had granted her a new, second life. This time, she plans to destroy everyone who brought her to this point. Nadia promises herself that she will live only for revenge. First, feigning mad love, she marries the Balazit family's longtime enemy, the Northern Marquise of Winterfeld. The girl thinks that since she's his enemy's daughter, Glenn couldn't have truly fallen in love with her. The main character thought everything had worked out as she'd planned. Now, the main character recalls walking down the hallway with her fiancé on her arm. She twisted her ankle, and the man helped her walk. She was worried about the pain in her leg, but something else was more troubling. Her husband, who was standing too close. Nadia's head replays moments when the Marquise was kind to her, and the girl assumes that the guy might have become interested in her. The great multi-year war between the kingdom and the demons ended in victory for the kingdom thanks to the efforts of one hero. The people hailed the savior who brought this war to an end, and his name was Li Ji-ho. There is a more beautiful description for him: a warrior from another world, a dragon slayer, and also the groom of the abandoned woman from the Duchy of Balazit. When the girl married Lord Li Ji-ho, she didn't seem very happy. Their marriage took place before Li Ji-ho became a hero. That's how the whole tragedy began. Nadia Balazit is the daughter of a concubine from the Balazit family, a puppet. Whenever she passed by, she overheard gossip. Others said they didn't understand why they needed such useless trash, and her family said she was a disgrace to their family. The protagonist never dreamed her father would acknowledge her, as Nadia was constantly compared to her younger sister, who had spoiled her since childhood. The servants also treated her with disdain. But suddenly, she had a chance to earn her father's respect. He proposed marriage to Li Ji-ho. Back then, Li Ji-ho was a mercenary summoned from another world to protect the kingdom. His development was so rapid, it was frightening. Duke Balazit was certain that tying him to his daughter would definitely work to his advantage. So he entered into a sham marriage with Nadia, and they both became Balazit's pawns. As they stood together, the protagonist asked the boy if he was okay. After a moment of silence, he replied that he would definitely succeed, and no one would dare ignore him. Even though they had been forced into marriage, Nadia still held on to the hope that one day they would be able to live as a normal husband and wife, until she fell into a trap. A golden-haired woman came to the prison cell, opened the door, and asked what had happened to her sister. Nadia insisted there had been a misunderstanding and that she could explain everything. The girl asked for Li Ji-ho. The sister apologized and said Lord Li Ji-ho would never come. The protagonist didn't understand what her interlocutor was saying, but she continued, saying that everything had changed dramatically since Nadia first married him. After all, he was now the most important man in this country, and his wife couldn't be someone like her sister. Karain Balazit is Nadia's half-sister. She asks if there could be a misunderstanding, and insists that the girl must have mistakenly thought she had imprisoned her here. The protagonist can't believe it, and says Karain and her father are involved. At first, she thought it was because of their feud with their half-sister, but the golden-haired lady asked if her sister really thought that, considering it was a major scandal that had spread throughout high society. The father, his daughter, and the national hero were discussing how to get rid of Nadia. Someone insisted there was only one way: to give the girl alcohol at the upcoming banquet. She's usually very cautious, so they had to slip her something to make her drunk. After that, they planned to plant a hired man on her, and when she woke up, they would call people. The more witnesses, the better. When this happened, people immediately began to downplay the outcry, saying it was highly indecent and that the girl was immediately obvious that she was the daughter of a concubine. They claimed it was shameless. The stepsister asks the protagonist if she knew Lord Li Ji-ho proposed this idea. Come to think of it, he never visited Nadia after that incident. The girl thought it was because he was disappointed in her, but in reality, he had planned everything himself. Even marrying her, the daughter of a concubine, must have seemed discriminatory to him. If the Lord had simply proposed a divorce, the main character wouldn't have objected, as it was a mere pamphlet, and it would have been rather foolish to hope for anything. Her half-sister argues that his reputation would have been damaged, as he was a war hero. Nadia asks if her sister has come because she felt sorry for him, and that's why he's become a hero now. Karain doesn't let her finish her sentence, and insists that she can say whatever she wants. This is her last chance, because it's all she has left. A golden-haired woman claps her hands and asks who will take in someone abandoned by her husband for an affair with another man. Perhaps the girl is an illegitimate child and cannot marry anyone but a simple worker. Therefore, she will help her sister just this once. She says her father wanted to let her stay, but Nadia decided to commit suicide out of shame. Two men attack the girl and try to put her into an eternal sleep. The golden-haired lady claims that once the main character's name is tarnished by her shameless act, she will be remembered as a girl who knows shame. Nadia wonders if she really wants to end her life like this. All her life, she's done as her father tells her, been obedient. As a child, she always watched her stepmother's reaction. She couldn't even breathe without her permission. Her stepsister had taken all the good things from her, and now the golden-haired lady was saying goodbye to her sister, flashing a fake smile and saying she would miss her. After all, the girl had died at only 23 years old. The protagonist thought it would all end this way, but when she opened her eyes, she was transported back to one day when she was 20. Nadia noticed the rope was gone from her neck and wondered how she had managed to survive. In her dark mind, she clearly felt the dark end of her life enveloping her body, but she woke up completely healthy in her room, and everyone there looked the same as they had 3 years ago. She had another chance, a chance to take revenge on her selfish fiancé, her sister who laughed while she was being killed, and her father who used her and then got rid of her like some kind of trash. The main character stands near the mirror and ponders what other people would choose if they were given a second chance. Maybe they would want to live for love or live long and in full health. The girl, after thinking for a while, chooses revenge. The maid enters Nadia's room and tells her that she should have rung the bell immediately. When she woke up, she couldn't clean the room because of the brunette. She sees the girl touching her reflection in the mirror and says that touching the mirror with her hands will leave stains. The maid pushes the protagonist away and begins wiping the mirror, angrily reproaching her mistress for not even knowing the ropes. Nadia worried it might all be a dream, but the girl actually did somehow return to the past, because this maid was responsible for the cleanliness of her room before Karain killed her 3 years ago. Moreover, on the day of the banquet, when the main character was captured, she slipped Karain alcohol on Karain's orders. She drank it and lost consciousness, too suspicious to be called a coincidence. At the time, Nadia didn't realize that the servant had tricked her, but now she knew she wouldn't fall for it again. She asked her mistress what that expression was and if she wanted to tell her something. The brunette thanks her for always cleaning her room and informs her when she'll be back. The maid notices a change in the atmosphere. When Nadia leaves her room and enters the hallway, she is met by a maid. She claims that His Majesty the King has come to see the Duke and that the lady must prepare for His Majesty's meeting. The protagonist doesn't understand why the king would visit her father. The girl says it's just in time and she'll be ready soon. Nadia meets her father and claims he called her. The Duke says his daughter is very late, and the girl says she was in a hurry. She realizes her father looks at her as if she were some kind of worthless thing. In the past, she had feared that gaze and meekly submitted, trembling with fear. Her father steps forward and insists he'll tell her everything along the way, so she must listen carefully. They'll talk about the triumphal ceremony, which is why the king has come. His daughter and Karain must make sure the tea is ready. Also, the question of her awarding Lord Jihoda the laurel wreath will come up, and she must agree to it. Nadia tells her father she'll do it, but in her mind, she realizes the king has come because of the ceremony commemorating the triumph during the Kalai expedition. Such ceremonies are a long-standing tradition. A married woman places a laurel wreath on the hero for whom the ceremony is being held. In other words, it's a declaration of love. The problem is that one of those honored at this ceremony is a northerner, and therefore the South's worst enemy. The girl realizes that this is probably why the king wants to shift the focus by allowing her to give the wreath to Lee Jiho. They want to bind the lord to her through marriage. Even if the main character refuses, her father won't listen, but she needs a chance to free herself from her father and Lee Jiho. The Duke and his daughter enter the room. The king insists he was waiting for him, and the Duke must know why he came to him. The man asks how he could know, since he can't read minds. His Majesty addresses the topic and says that the Kalai Expeditionary Force demanded a triumphal ceremony. His interlocutor says they deserve it and should do as they request. Kroll slams his hand on the table, spilling tea on the floor, and insists that the problem isn't that, but who is in that force. One of the leaders, whose greatest achievements are attributed to their bitter northern enemy, the Marquis of Winterfell. He'll receive a lot of attention at this ceremony, which might make the Northerners feel a bit overconfident. His Highness asks how anyone can speak of such things so calmly. The Duke claims he needn't worry about it, as he'll shift the focus of the ceremony to something else. He has a plan to tie the Northerners' hands. The king immediately asks Togo to tell him about it quickly. The protagonist is amazed that the man took everything her father said so seriously, without hesitation. No wonder the Northerners are displeased. The Duke claims that he will bind the Marquis in marriage. The king must use his authority and order him to marry. His bride must be the daughter of a southern nobleman, so they can prevent him from allying with someone from the north. Hearing this, Nadia recalled that after she and Li Jiho became husband and wife, as a reward for the success of the expedition, the Marquis of Winterfell also married. Of course, his bride was a girl from the family his father had introduced to the king. Rumor had it she cried constantly because of the Duke's cruelty and eventually ran away. The main character felt sorry for the girl, who had become nothing more than a puppet in her father's plans. The brunette realizes that if she becomes this girl now, she can avoid marriage to the Lord and his revenge, but she can't be rash. It's too early to talk about it. The Duke argues that it's a good idea and asks who would willingly give him their daughter. The Duke suggests that the king doesn't trust the loyalty of his servants. For the sake of the country, people will certainly give up their daughter. Nadia realizes this is her chance. She turns to His Highness and begs for forgiveness. She says she'd like to tell him something. The king allows the protagonist to speak. Her father asks how she dares to interrupt, but the girl ignores this and says that if they need someone who will have to go to the enemy camp in the north, then she can do it. The Duke is slightly taken aback by this answer and clenches his fist. Nadia says she is from the Balazit family, who have served His Majesty their entire lives and are therefore the most trustworthy. She asks to be allowed to marry an enemy for the sake of the king and the well-being of their country. In her mind, the girl apologizes to her father for no longer being his pawn. His Highness repeats the girl's words about marrying the Marquis of Winterfell. The Duke claims his daughter doesn't seem to know what she's talking about and must be unaware of his relationship with Winterfell. His Highness says it's a commendable decision, but as the girl's father has said, their families are sworn enemies. Forcing someone else to marry Nadia would be far easier than marrying him. The bad Marquis of Winterfell might not take her. Still, the girl said she had a wonderful idea. Nadia replies that it is so, that at this ceremony she will present the laurel wreath to the Marquis of Winterfell. Duke, tell him that his daughter is foolish, and ask if she thinks he will accept this wreath from her so easily. The main character claims that no one has ever refused a laurel wreath. The father puts his hand on his head and replies that they've already planned for the girl to present the wreath to Li Jiho. At first, the brunette doesn't know what to say, but then says he won't refuse her. When her father asks why, she replies that she overheard their conversation while making tea and wonders if the Marquis himself hadn't demanded this ceremony. She argues that awarding a wreath makes sense, but if someone refuses it, the situation changes. All the attention will shift to the poor soul who was denied recognition. Of course, a hero is someone people love, but love between two people is far more interesting and captivating. The main character says that people will quickly forget about his merits and asks if he will really decide to destroy with his own hands everything he has strived for so much, so he will accept the wreath, and then. The father does not let the brunette finish her sentence and says that His Majesty can influence him so that he cannot refuse. Then he will have no choice. The daughter claims that this is true and tells His Majesty to insist on the marriage under the pretext of the official's daughter's plea. Then he will become a magnanimous ruler who only wants to make the noble lady's love come true. The king says it's a devious plan, but he's very persuasive. He's still a little nervous though, as he's about to send the Duke's daughter to the enemy camp, so he decides to ask the Duke first what he thinks about it. The father claims that he did not know that his daughter had such a wonderful plan and decides that at this ceremony, his daughter will present the wreath to the Marquis of Winterfell, but judging by the way he clasps his hands on his knees, one can understand that he does not want this. After His Highness left, Karain claims that she knew that her sister was stupid, but she didn't think that she was that stupid because she did all this knowing who this Marquis was. which means she was going to voluntarily go to the north, even knowing that he was their enemy. The younger sister asks her father to say something, but he tells her to stop and says that it is none of her business. He asks Nadia to explain what she was thinking when she suggested such a thing. After all, he'd made her role perfectly clear. The man asks if his daughter dared to disobey an order. Although the main character has received His Majesty's permission, if she can't convince her father, she will lose again, so she must make the right move. The girl claims she has no desire to marry a stranger whose origins are unknown, although she does have Balazit blood in her veins. The Duke asks if this is the only reason, since her unnecessary pride now forces them to give all the honor to the Marquise of Winterfell. The brunette is frightened, but she understands that she no longer wants to live as a pawn. She insists that her father should allow him to experience this for just a moment. The daughter asks if preventing a potential rebellion isn't more important, which is why they were trying to divert people's attention from the ceremony. Her father asks how she found out. The girl realizes she's hit the nail on the head. The reason her father is so sensitive about the Northerners' glory is that the imperial family is now, quite literally, a puppet of the Duchy of Balazit. In other words, this is exactly what her father has been trying to achieve for so long. The king himself is in his hands, but at the same time, he is in the most vulnerable position. There have been many cases of provincial leaders plotting rebellion in times as turbulent as these. That's why my father is worried. The Marquise is threatening his position. The protagonist realizes she must delve deeper into what he fears. She insists that even if not at this ceremony, they will still gather secretly. Whoever gains all the glory must observe them, and this ceremony is the best place for such a thing. They will give the thirsty animal water and place a collar on it. The Duke was intrigued by this story. Nadia continued to say that if she married the Marquis of Winterfell, they would be able to learn more quickly about changes in the north. Thanks to the brown-haired woman's sacrifice, they would be able to strengthen their position. The girl begs her father to allow her to do this for the sake of their family. The man thinks that this really does make sense. This expedition did not go as he expected. Because of the success of the Northerners, they are forced to hold a ceremony. But if Nadia goes north as Winterfell's consort, they'll be able to learn more about their movements. This is a good chance to plant a spy in his entourage. The Duke agrees with his daughter and says they'll do as she wishes. Karin didn't expect such an answer. She asks her father if he's really going to send her sister north and asks what about Lord Li Jiho, who wanted to marry Nadia to him. The man tells his daughter to be quiet. He can find her a new bride. The Duke turns to his older sister and asks her what she truly wants. He knows full well she's not doing this for him and asks what she expects in return for her sacrifice. The protagonist realizes she's managed to deceive him thus far. Now, she just needs to answer this question correctly. She insists she wants freedom. One day, her father will defeat his enemy, Winterfell. The brunette asks her father to let her live like a wealthy widow. Unmarried girls are frowned upon by society, but widows and divorcees are not. Nadia insists that even if she doesn't remarry, she no longer wants to bear their family name. She doesn't want to be tied to anyone. She desires a normal life and asks if her father can promise her that. After such a tense conversation, the main character walks out into the hallway. The deal was successful. From the very first day she returned to the past, she managed to avoid marrying Li Jiho. Nadia looks out the window and sees a maid screaming that she's guilty and begging for her trust. The head maid orders her to be quiet and asks how she dared touch her mistress's things. The maid, captured by the knights, looks at her mistress and screams that she didn't steal anything, begging the protagonist to do something. But the brunette doesn't seem too worried about this, since it was she who framed the maid. In the morning, the protagonist took the jewelry from the box and attached it to the maid's dress. She realizes that Karen's puppet has been expelled. She was given a chance to cope with everything on her own. Although Nadia was still far from seeking revenge, she needed to lay out her future plans in detail. While she was plotting how to destroy the Duchy of Balazit, it was time for the ceremony. A servant informed the Marquise that preparations for the ceremony were complete and asked him to lead the detachment. As they were about to depart, flower petals flew everywhere, congratulating the detachment on their victory. Watching the soldiers march in formation, the people joyfully greeted them. The protagonist realizes that everything is exactly the same as in her past life, from the clothes and jewelry she's wearing to the seats everyone is sitting in. If the girl hadn't interfered, everything would have gone on as it had in her past life. The younger sister looks at her pendant in Nadia's hands and asks what her sister will do if a crack appears on hers. She claims she borrowed it because her father ordered her to return it as soon as the ceremony was over. The protagonist thinks about how Karain claimed to have lent her mother's jewelry, but she doesn't have the strength to respond. Previously, the brunette always tried to please her, but now she doesn't care about her younger sister because she'll definitely run away. The Duke raises his hand and orders them to stop because the squad will arrive soon. He tells his daughter to get ready, try not to screw up, and hand the wreath to Glen of Winterfell with dignity. There was only one way in which the ceremony from the past life differed from today's. The main hero to whom she presented the wreath was the Marquis Glen of Winterfell. The main character looks at the man behind him. It's Lee Ji-ho, the man supposed to be the hero of this ceremony, her ex-husband. Although they didn't marry for love, there seemed to be some connection between them. The girl remembers him saying there was only one way to make it look like this marriage never happened. At the upcoming banquet, he would drug Nadia with alcohol and then plant a hired man on her, and after she woke up, he would call people. The brunette's heart was beating so fast now. The king declared that he would grant the knights glory for their deeds. They responded that it was an honor. His Highness claimed to have heard that Winterfell had played a particularly important role in this expedition. This news warmed his heart. The Marquis apologizes and says the rumors are exaggerated. The king tells him to cast aside his modesty. Looking at him, he recalls the previous ruler of Winterfell, who was also a distinguished knight. The man asserts that Glaen's loyalty to Winterfell is commendable, and if his bedridden father were to learn of his exploits, he would certainly be pleased. The Marquis does not answer. The main character understands that the most painful topic for the Marquis of Winterfell is connected with his father, but His Highness still spoke about it. The king says he should reward the boy's family for their loyalty, but he says it's enough for them that His Highness knows about it. The ruler says young people are very serious at this time. At the king's command, the official ceremony began. His Highness announced that they had all gathered here today to congratulate the heroes on their victory in the Kalia expedition. Immediately afterward, the greeting of families began, and the Duke of Balasith was the first to meet the Marquis of Glen. He congratulated the young Lord of Winterfell and extended his hand. The young man replied that he had inherited the title and was now a Marquis. Glen argues that if the Duke's memory is failing him, he should leave his post and rest. The man pulls his hand back slightly and says he was mistaken, but even though Glen became a Marquis at such a young age, he still lacks much. Glen asks what could be difficult for a man in his prime. The Duke replies that the boy doesn't really resemble the former Marquis in his ardor. Then he gasps and says that he's talking about a man who suffered an accident, and he truly feels sorry. It's time to deliver the gifts prepared for the heroes. Nadia emerges with a bouquet, delighted that it's finally her turn. Holding the wreath in her slender hands, she heads toward the knights. The Marquis understands why his enemy so happily agreed to perform the ceremony. He decided to change the nature of the ceremony. Then, the owner of that wreath must be Lee Ji-ho. After all, everyone knows her father supports him. Glen thinks this ceremony was originally just for him, so he should just let it slide. Come to think of it, this expedition took longer than he thought, and the Marquis suspects he must have a mountain of work piling up back home. It would be nice if they paid them handsomely as a reward. Glen opens his eyes and sees Nadia standing before him, wearing a laurel wreath. He doesn't understand why Balazit's daughter is standing before him. He thinks the girl is nervous about the large crowd. The Marquis leans over to the main character and whispers that she made a mistake due to nervousness. He points his finger at the black-haired man standing behind him, claiming it's Lee Ji-ho. Glen suggests the girl walk slowly in that direction, and everyone will overlook her minor nervous mistake. But Nadia doesn't budge, insisting she wasn't mistaken. The Marquis asks the girl what she's talking about. The brunette says the Marquis of Winterfell has been on her mind for a long time. She hands the boy a laurel wreath and asks him to accept it. The crowd begins to gossip, but the girl continues to say that she fell in love with Glen at first sight, as soon as she saw him, and felt he was the one who could take care of her for the rest of her life. The mayor of Winterfell was completely surprised. He leaned toward the lady and asked if she knew what it meant when an adult woman presented a wreath to a man. The heroine realized the man was far more rude than they said. Nadia assured him she knew and was now declaring her love. His Majesty turned to the Marquis of Winterfell, who insisted the beautiful lady was waiting and asked why the man was silent. Glen says he doesn't deserve this wreath and can't accept it. He has no idea what's going on, but the guy doesn't like it. He can't fall for it. The main character was prepared for this reaction, as he wouldn't accept it so easily. She apologizes to the Marquis in advance and thinks it would also be beneficial for him to marry her. The girl realizes there's nothing she can do and will have to push a little. The brunette grabs the man by the sleeve and says that if he's worried about her being the daughter of a concubine, He can simply accept the wreath and not worry about her. Nadia plans to first garner pity from the people, and she succeeds. The Marquise turns to the protagonist and asks what she's talking about, but the crowd immediately begins to complain about why the Marquise won't accept the wreath. The commoners claim he's disgracing the young lady. They ask if he's making up for his anger at the young lady over his disagreement with the Duke. The crowd urges the young man to accept Lady Balazit's sincere love. The Marquis realizes his enemies have tried to ruin the ceremony with his own hands. The young man grabs the bouquet and insists that this is a long conversation and they will continue later. He turns and leaves with a laurel wreath. The heroine realizes she's succeeded and breathes a sigh of relief, having changed the future. The Duke and his daughters set off for the carriage. He insists Nadia is great, and it was worth it. Seeing Glenn's confused face, he has no choice but to accept the offer. The eldest daughter smiles and replies that he doesn't have to thank her. Suddenly, a shout rings out. It's Lord Li Jiho. He's shouting that he urgently needs to speak with the Duke. The man asks what's wrong and claims the boy must be tired after all that travel, wondering why the Lord isn't going to rest. Li Jiho says that he urgently needs to ask the Duke something. The guy heard that Lady Nadia was supposed to present him with a wreath at today's ceremony and asks what happened. The main character looks at her father, wondering if he really told him in advance. The Duke understands what the boy is saying and claims it happened because the matter was urgent, so he couldn't inform Li Jiho. The man apologizes and says he'll find a more suitable match for the Lord, so he shouldn't be upset. The boy then cries out that he didn't come to the man to find a new bride. He wants to know why the Duke changed his plans. The blonde replies that there was a reason, and this isn't the place to discuss it. The Lord cries out, "Does the Duke think this is too much?" A similar incident happened before he joined the army. The father cries out, pointing at the boy. He asks what he wants now, since the ceremony has already taken place. The Lord is a little frightened, but the Duke calms down and places a hand on his shoulder, saying that, in any case, it was his fault for not warning Li Jiho. He asks Togo to believe that he will make amends and make up for it. The blonde asks if the boy understands what he's talking about. The Lord says he does and agrees with the man. After that, the Duke climbs into the carriage and calls his daughters. The main character notices the look on her husband's face in her past life. She doesn't understand why he has that expression, though now she doesn't care. It doesn't bother her now, because he was the one who betrayed her first. The Marquis returned to his mansion, now sitting at his desk, pondering something. He sighs. The servant turns to his master and says he heard everyone at the market talking about the recent ceremony, in which a lady rarely seen confessed her love to the Marquis. The young man insists that his master must somehow respond to this, or he will be forced into marriage. Glenn, closing his eyes and covering his face with his hand, says it's too late. He orders his servant to read the letter lying on the table. The young man notices that it's from the royal family. After reading it, the servant realizes that, albeit veiled, they're actually telling the Marquis to marry. Glenn says it's true, and if he continues to refuse, they'll consider it disobeying the king's orders. The boy cries out that this is too much and asks why they're treating his master like this. After all, take this expedition, for example. The Marquis meekly agreed to it, so what more could they want? The servant claims that, moreover, their army and lands pay their taxes reliably, but even so, the government still doubts Glenn. The Marquis assumes the Duke of Balasith did it, as he wants to frame him for rebellion. The northern territory where Winterfell is located wasn't always part of the kingdom. It was subjugated 100 years ago. North and south, differing culturally and in many other ways, didn't easily become friends. The northern army protected the northern border from monsters, thereby ensuring safety and fertility in the south. However, the southerners, despite this, considered the northerners savage and terrifying. Thus, the previous Marquess and Marchioness of Winterfell met with an accident due to someone's conspiracy, and the Duke of Balasith is the one most under suspicion. From there, the Duke presents the Marquis of Winterfell with a laurel wreath. Glenn says there are two reasons why they want this marriage to take place. First, to prevent the Northerners from forming an alliance through marriage. And secondly, send spies into the enemy camp. The servant says that this is an excellent way to find out about a possible rebellion before anyone else, and also Lord Li Jiho. According to the people at the ceremony, Lady Nadia was supposed to present the wreath to him. They say he was terribly surprised by what happened. Glenn asks if it was meant for him. The servant replies that, yes, he had heard that Lady Nadia and Lord Li Jiho had secretly promised to unite their hearts and lives. It seems the plan regarding Lord Jiho was hastily changed. I remember they didn't tell him about it. The Marquis looks at the laurel wreath and realizes he was right about it being intended for the brunette. He insists he will have to do as His Majesty wishes, otherwise they will have a perfect excuse to attack. The servant points out that the girl is, after all, the Duke's daughter. Glenn tells the boy not to worry, because no matter how you look at it, Nadia is simply the Duke's beautiful daughter. She won't be able to accomplish anything on foreign soil without a single ally. He doubts the girl will endure the servant's cold attitude for even a week, because it can't be otherwise. She'll want to return home herself, and the Marquise won't have anything to do with it. As a result, the Winterfell and Balasith families were united, the wedding taking place on Winterfell's grounds, and the betrothal in the capital. After quickly settling these minor details, a banquet was held at Balasith's manor to celebrate the new family's arrival. The nobles who had mocked the protagonist continued to gossip, claiming she had neither shame nor conscience. The girl's father was enjoying what was happening, but now Nadia had no time to pay attention to them. The brunette invited the Marquise to dance. She had to live up to the image of a lovesick noblewoman, burning with love, with her eyes fixed on only one man. The girl sensed something at the ceremony, and the Marquise of Winterfell became even more wary of the Balasith family. The main character realizes she first needs to show him she's not dangerous. Glenn bends the girl over while dancing and asks her what she's thinking. But Nadia wasn't taken aback and said she thought Glenn was so handsome. The Marquis said the girl calls him by his first name, even though they're not close at all. He tells the girl to call him Marquis of Winterfell, and the main character agrees, but adds Glenn at the end. The guy lets go of the girl's hands and says he wonders if she'll be able to smile as brightly in the north. He leaves the main character alone, and everyone around starts gossiping. Some say the girl is a poor thing and ask why she fell in love with a northerner, while others say she's so ashamed she can't lift her head. Nadia is overjoyed. The guy is finally gone, and Vina can no longer force a smile. The brunette goes out onto the balcony and thinks how hard it is. Her whole body is cramping from forcing herself to smile all day. Someone calls the main character. It's Lee Ji-ho. He's finally found a girlfriend. Nadia asks what's going on and wonders why he came. He claims he came because he wants to ask him something. The brunette asks what he wants to ask, but she has nothing else to say to the Lord. The guy asks if she really hates being married to him so much. The main character didn't expect such a question. The guy continues, asking if the girl would rather endure humiliation and sidelong glances, heading into the very center of the enemy camp, than be with him. Nadia claims she understands what the brunette is saying, since it wasn't clearly agreed upon from the start that they would get married. Lee Ji-ho says the Duke has already told him everything. The plans were changed at the girl's request. The brunette replies that she has nothing more to say, but the Lord doesn't back down, asking if he's unworthy of hearing the truth, and that's because he's an outsider and his origins are unknown. Nadia doesn't understand what's wrong with him, since he was the one who betrayed her first. Clenching her fists, she says that the Lord himself wasn't happy about their marriage. The guy asks when he ever said such a thing, but the brown-haired woman replies that she's not a fool. Ji-ho was worried about being discriminated against because of his background, and asks if that's why he wanted to marry a girl from a noble family. Nadia claims that she is just an abandoned woman, and if the guys proposed to marry Karain, he would not hesitate for a second. Ji-ho is surprised by the question and doesn't respond. As the brunette thought, he can't answer, so Karain's words were true. What was the girl expecting? The lady says they are not suited to each other, so she suggests they go their separate ways. She leaves the Lord alone. The girl came into the garden, thinking that at least here she could be alone, but at that very moment, she heard footsteps. It turned out to be Karain. She asked if they could talk. The protagonist wondered why her sister had come here and was saddened that she couldn't be alone for even a minute. The golden-haired girl pokes her sister in the forehead and asks why she's following a man around and bringing shame on their family. She doesn't think Karain will simply tolerate it. The lady insists that as a true daughter of the family, she has a duty to warn Nadia. She asks if she was jealous that her father only cared about his younger sister and if she wanted his attention, so she went along with it. Karain calls her sister a poor thing, insisting that no matter how hard she tries, she'll still be a pawn. The brunette smirks and agrees. She asks if Karain has considered that they aren't so different after all. She failed to marry Lord Ji-ho, so now it's the golden-haired lady's turn. The younger sister furiously attacks Nadia, claiming she's the Duchess's daughter. The brunette asks if her sister still believes her father, since his daughter is just a means to an end. Karain furiously asks how she dares to classify her as such scum, and whether she's even laughing at her now. The girl threatens to tell her father everything, but Nadia's gaze is fixed on Karain's neck, where her mother's necklace hangs. The younger sister notices the girl looking at her mother's jewelry. She takes it off, and asks if it's the same jewelry Nadia's mother received from her father. The golden-haired woman claims he gave it to her because he thought she would bear a son, but a girl appeared, and the brown-haired woman didn't deserve him. She asks if the girl wants to take it back. If so, let her kneel and beg. Karain orders them to repeat after her that the girl is sorry for behaving so recklessly towards her and will never irritate her younger sister again. The golden-haired lady insists that if she begs convincingly, she will forgive him or simply get rid of him, since she has many such trinkets, and might as well throw one away. She began to hold her hand with the necklace over the pond. The main character is furious. Her sister asks if she wants to, and if nothing can be done about it, the girl is already preparing to throw the necklace into the pond, but the brunette stops her and asks if her sister will really give it to her if she kneels. Her sister assures her that she will. She thinks Nadia has no choice. Such a quiet girl is suddenly starting to show off and irritate her. Now she'll learn her lesson. In any case, the golden-haired lady has no intention of returning the jewelry. She orders the protagonist to kneel quickly because she's generous if you ask nicely. The brunette wastes no time in throwing her sister into the pond, even in shock, furiously screaming at Nadia to ask if she's crazy and what the hell she's doing, because she doesn't think Karain will let her get away with this. The main character asks what will happen if he doesn't let her go. She holds the jewelry in her hands and insists that the golden-haired lady wouldn't return it, no matter how much she begged. Something similar happened in a past life, when the brunette obeyed her sister without question, but as a result, she was never able to return the necklace. The main character says she thought about this a lot as a child, wondering why her sister hated her so much. She wondered if Karain would even consider her his sister if she did as she said, but she realized her younger sister hated her for no apparent reason. So now she's given Karain a real reason, a genuine reason to hate her. The golden-haired lady doesn't recognize her sister. In her mind, she wonders if this is really the Nadia she knew. The girl's skin crawls. Her sister seems like a different person. People came running at the sound of the screams, shouting that there was a person in the water and that they needed to quickly bring something to cover her. One of the guys put his jacket on the lady and asked if she was okay. The Duke runs out into the street, asking what the noise his daughters are making in the middle of the night is all about. Karain immediately throws herself into her father's arms, tears streaming down her face. She screams that it's all that dirty girl's fault, pointing at Nadia. She thinks her sister is finished. The Duke asks if it's true. Karain is sure the girls won't escape, as she has proof, but the main character only laughs at such words, covering her mouth with her hands so no one will notice. The brunette turns to her sister and says that despite all her hatred, how can she lie like that? She didn't listen to her and still went to the edge, even though she said it was dangerous. Nadia, claiming she was only trying to pull her out, asks if her sister is afraid of being thought badly of, but her lies bring more shame to their family. The golden-haired woman insists it was Nadia, her sister, who threatened her with her mother's necklace, and the girl pushed her. Some of the people begin whispering about threats. They say that since she threatened them with a necklace, she must have a nasty character. They speculate about why the heirloom belonging to the first daughter's mother is in the possession of the second daughter, and wonder if she is more beloved in the duchy. Karain denies this and tries to justify himself, but the Duke puts his hand on her shoulder and tells her she's cold and should return to the common room before she catches a cold. He thinks that if he leaves this matter alone, rumors will spread. The golden-haired lady protests that this is unfair and asks him to listen to her. The father merely shouts for the servant to take Karen to her room. He tells the guests that a minor quarrel had broken out between the sisters, and he's sorry it happened on such a bright day. But the people leave, continuing to gossip as they go. They claim that Balazit's noble daughter has brought such disgrace on the family. One of the ladies says she knew this would happen someday, and that she would keep quiet for a while. Friction notes that the father hasn't sided with Karain, contrary to what she expected. But now it doesn't matter to her, because she returned her mother's necklace, and now she can calmly leave this place. The Marquis and his knights are in the forest, near the Winterfell grounds. One of the knights calls out to his master. Glenn insists he's being too noisy and should return. Fabian tells the Marquis not to be so rude. He'll just ask a few questions, and then return, though it's a figurative question. The servant asks if the mistress's confession wasn't sincere, and the young man immediately kicks his servant. The Marquis insists that if the young man is going to continue spouting such nonsense, he should get lost. Fabian says he also knows she's deceiving his master, but looking at her face during the ceremony, he thought she was sincere, and the young man isn't entirely sure she was lying. Glenn tells his servant not to trust appearances. Nadia is a duke's daughter, and could stab him in the back at any moment. He suggests Fabian just look at her devotion. He wonders if it's truly meant to help their family in difficult times, or if she's just planning to spy on them. The knight realizes his master is right. The Marquis says that if the boy understands, he should return to his place. After all, he's the girl's guard and must be careful. If she has a problem, it will be a headache. Fabian returns to the carriage, thinking he's happy to be with her after what he heard, which worries him even more. The main character looks out from the carriage and tells her escort that she wanted to talk to him, but the knight disappeared, so they had to wait. Fabian, nearly fainting from this, says he had a little business to attend to, hoping the girl didn't overhear their conversation. Nadia says she heard the boy appointed her as a guard and asks his name. The servant says his name is Fabian Knox. The brunette compliments him, saying it's a beautiful name. The boy looks away and thanks his mistress. The girl looks at Fabian and insists that, as she thought, he's awkward around her. The knight realizes he was too obvious. The protagonist claims she understands. As everyone knows, the Balazith and Winterfell families are enemies. Nadia assures him that her feelings for the Marquis are genuine. Fabian no longer knows who to trust. He recalls Glenn's words about not judging by appearances. The knight waves his hands and says he's just very shy. The boy asks if his mistress's mother is his first time in the north and offers to tell him about it while they're driving. The brunette thanks Fabian. She was just bored. The protagonist thinks what a relief it is. It seems she's managed to break through the younger knight's barrier. After the story, Nadia falls asleep. The girl wakes up from a knock on the window. Opening the window, she sees her knight. He invites his lady to go out for a while because they have arrived at the Winterfell mansion. The brunette, of course, knew the wedding preparations had been rushed, but she hadn't expected this at all. Rumor had it that Glenn's mother had brought this wedding dress with her, as the wedding was not far away, so the decision had been made to choose it. The maid claimed the girl had probably heard about it before, but there was an influx of monsters in the north and the lean season, so the people were in dire straits, leading to a modest wedding ceremony. The maid insisted that, of course, a wedding only happens once in a lifetime, but the main character doesn't let her finish her sentence and says it's all fine, she understands. The maid is shocked by this answer and asks again what her mistress said. Nadia insists that as long as she's with Glenn, it doesn't matter what the size of the wedding is. She smiles warmly and says that, besides, she's now a marquise, so she has to think about her people. A woman approaches the brunette and says that if the girl thinks this way, she can rest easy. The lady hopes Nadia will always think this way. The main character greets Lady Grace. Grace Ground is Glenn of Winterfell's aunt. The previous marchioness has already died, and the previous marquise is bedridden, so she is now the oldest lady in the family. The woman insists that this dress suits Nadia perfectly, saying that when Glenn sees it, he'll go mad. The protagonist thanks the lady and tells her she would be delighted. The silver-haired lady approaches the girl and takes a lock of her hair. She tells Nadia that Glenn is even rude to her because of her father, but assures her there's nothing to worry about. The brunette is so beautiful, and with time, Glenn will open his heart to her. The lady says she will help, and the protagonist needs to focus only on opening his soul. The lady knows what the mistress meant with these words. Grace knows the marquise hasn't yet acknowledged Nadia. The protagonist smiles warmly and says she'll remember that, after which Aunt Glena says it's time for her to go. As they part, she asks if the girl knows the most important thing in seduction, suggesting she prepare well. The brunette could only think of one thing, their wedding night. She thought he'd want to touch her, and therefore refused to spend the night together. But what if this man offered to spend the night together? Now the main character, in her wedding dress, is heading to her groom, but the girl can't stop thinking about her conversation with Lady Grace. She kept thinking about it, and the idea of them sleeping together wouldn't leave her mind. The bride and groom were about to say their vows, but all she could think about was whether they would sleep in the same room immediately after the wedding ceremony. Glenn is asked if he takes Nadia Balazith as his wife and vows to love her forever. The marquise answers yes. When Nadia asks if she takes Glenn of Winterfell as her husband, the girl continues to wonder if the marquis will want to stay in bed with her, as he hates her so much. But what if he truly does want to? What should she do then? The brunette didn't expect that. When the main character is called a second time, she realizes what's happening and answers yes. Then they are told to seal their vows with a kiss. The girl was thinking only about how they would share a room. The idea of a kiss had completely slipped her mind. The brunette realizes that the marquis must be pretending to kiss, so what kind of cohabitation could they possibly be talking about? But Glenn kisses the girl for real, and they are pronounced husband and wife. Nadia is shocked, because the Marquis actually kissed her. That same evening, the brunette wanders around the room, unsure what to do or how to proceed. Time is running out, and her fiancé will be arriving soon. She wonders if they'll really sleep together, since he actually kissed her. But the girl's thoughts are interrupted by Glenn entering the room. Nadia realizes he really has come. The girl says she was waiting for him, but her thoughts are restless, wondering what to do and how to cope, since she can't run away anymore. The Marquise tells her not to be mistaken, insisting that he will never contact the Duke of Balazit's daughter, and has only come to tell Togo so personally. The protagonist asks her husband to wait, but he ignores her request and simply leaves. The maids notice that sobs are coming from their mistress's room. The girl says that her feelings are sincere. Why is Glenn so cruel? Sitting on the floor in her room, she sighs with relief and thinks how good it is that he's gone. The protagonist silently hopes he never changes his mind. The girl sees a plate of wine and appetizers on the table, and she remembers that she hasn't even had a proper meal today. The brunette begins eating, noticing that the beef jerky is delicious, and so is the wine, so she decides to try some fruit too. Having eaten her fill, Nadia goes to bed and thinks how wonderful it is. There is nothing more to worry about, and the bed is so soft, it seems like she will fall asleep any minute. The next day, the maids are gossiping among themselves. One of them asks if they heard what happened yesterday. The master immediately left their mistress's room without even stopping for 5 minutes, very angry. Another claims she bet he wouldn't come to her at all. Another maid asks what happened next. The girl with the disposable hair assumes that most likely they had a fight, and Nadia should be ashamed now. Another maid approaches them from behind and says she heard the mistress crying for a long time. According to another maid, the mistress's servant, she looked like a girl with unrequited love who had been rejected. When the maid approached the protagonist, she apologized and said she couldn't sleep without alcohol. The servants thought she would act arrogantly, but the master couldn't act otherwise. The girls were about to leave the room and continue their work. The Marquis and 2 knights were watching all this from the corner. One of them told his master that the maids needed to be kept quiet. The other agreed and said that this must be done by any means necessary. Glenn says there's no need to do that, just turn a blind eye. He asks if the boys think the maids will love her, and what Nadia's doing now. The knight replies that she's officially become a marquise, and shouldn't she be keeping an eye on the household? The Marquis asks if he's saying the girl has started spying on them full-time. He turns to Fabian and claims he's her guard, and the boy asks if his master wants him to keep an eye on her. Glenn replies that he does, that the boy is to watch to see if the brunette does anything suspicious, whether she's sending letters to her parents' house, and that the knight is to always be by her side and report everything to the Marquis. The protagonist asks if Glenn has sent a knight to guard her. Fabian replies that there are attacks, and from now on, he will take care of his mistress. Nadia wonders if the Marquise is angry that she's following him. The girl folds her arms, and with a beaming smile, says she's very glad her husband cares for her so much. The brunette replies that the Marquise thought the girl would be uncomfortable with strangers, and sent Fabian. What a good man he is. The knight, with a forced smile, replies that it's exactly true, but he came to keep an eye on Nadia, not to protect her, and the girl is so happy he's almost embarrassed. The knight says that he will wait at the door, and his mistress can go about her business in peace. The main character realizes that her fiancé has decided to watch her all day long, and she needs to somehow convince him that she is not a spy. The girl asks the butler to bring the housekeeping ledger. Gordon obeys his mistress, and within a minute, she's sitting with it in her hands, clearly surprised. Nadia asks why they have so much debt. In her past life, she knew Winterfell was not in great condition. This amount was already too much. The servant claims that this is a peculiarity of the North. Every few years, they are attacked by a wave of monsters. Their land is very depleted, so there are no resources, and no attractions either. Nadia asks if they don't receive a reward from the king every year for killing monsters, and what the money goes towards. The butler replies that thanks to that money, they've been able to survive until now, and that the Marquis recently took part in the Kalia expedition. The brunette insists that's why they can't participate in expeditions anymore. She didn't even know war required so much expense. The servant insists they didn't want to take part, but someone demanded they fulfill their duty. Gordon realizes what he just said. The protagonist asks if he means someone like her father. The girl throws her head back in her chair and thinks that in any case, she prepared a plan to make money, but she did not think that the amount of debt was so large. She is interested in how the Marquis of Winterfell paid off his debts in his past life. The butler claims he has a good solution, since she's now part of the Winterfell family. He asks to be allowed to speak frankly. arguing that times are so difficult for her new family. If the girl uses her dowry to pay off her debts, wouldn't she be able to help? The brunette wondered why he'd given her the seal to the warehouse so easily. He meant he wanted to test her, asking her to resolve her financial problems. Gordon asks if the marquise wouldn't be pleased if she helped. However, Nadia says no, and the butler asks his mistress to think again. The protagonist asks him to understand that she's not saying this because she doesn't want to help the Winterfell family. Looking at the expense ledger, it's clear the debt is slowly growing each year. The servant had previously said that the reason was the peculiarity of the North, so the dowry for the Duke's daughter wouldn't solve the problem in the long run. Eventually, the debt would reappear and grow. The butler doesn't know what to answer to this. After a couple of seconds, he tries to straighten up and asks if the situation for their lands isn't now hopeless. The brunette slams her hand on the table and claims that they will correct the peculiarity of their territory. The servant does not understand what his mistress is talking about, and she begins to tell him how to achieve this. When the knight returns to the marquis, Glenn asks if his wife said she couldn't use a single coin from her dowry. Fabian insists that's not true, repeating the main character's words about starting to increase her dowry rather than paying off the debt right now. The other knights say the young man is naive and trusts Nadia because she only seems nice. One of the knights exclaims that, whatever the truth, she said she wouldn't give her dowry. Fabian says the girl seemed serious when she spoke about the land's financial situation. He asks his master if he's sick of trusting such a slowpoke to spy on my wife. Another, squeezing his colleague with his hand, says how poor their youngest is. Glenn tells them all to return to their places, as they're making too much noise. Meanwhile, the protagonist strolls down the hallway. She sees a ton of work to be done, cobwebs hanging in the corners of the estate, and the statues are covered in dust. Someone's screams break the brunette's thoughts. One man shouts, "Doesn't the butler know how long they've been waiting?" Gordon tries to calm them down. Having gone down a little lower, the lady asks her servant what is going on here. One of the guests asks if this is the daughter of the Duke of Balazit. Nadia asks them to call her Marchioness of Winterfell. A man apologizes for being late introducing himself and says he's Shylock. Another claims to be Wayne of the Northern Traders Alliance. The woman behind also introduces herself, saying her name is Katarina and that we're from the Krita Trading Company. The main character tells them to drop the formalities and tell her what they discussed here. Shylock says that in that case, they can tell her something. He shouts for the mistress to give them the money. The day for repayment of the funds lent by the marquise will soon arrive. Nadia is shocked, but the boy continues to shout. He says he heard the girl brought a substantial dowry with her. If she says she can't pay her debts this time, they'll take the wind-shaded plain they left as collateral. The main character, she realizes, is the only fertile land in this depleted territory. She recalled how the marquise had paid off his debts in his past life by simply giving them the land. The girl asks when the debt repayment date will be, and Gordon replies that it will be in 3 months. The brunette understands that if the plain is taken away, the Winterfell family will be completely impoverished. No matter how powerful the army the marquis had, or whether he had the finances, he would not be able to become the leader who united the North. Nadia asks to give them 2 more months. If they postpone repaying the debt for another 2 months, she will resolve this issue. Shylock says that he knows that the girl brought with her an impressive dowry and asks why she needs 2 extra months. Nadia confidently replies that she will use her dowry for business. The man asks what all this means, and that instead of paying off debts, the lady is going to open a business. The Marchioness claims that the Winterfell family has close ties to merchants from the northern regions. It would be good if they would consider their long-standing friendship and help create a better future for Winterfell. She says she will never forget their help. Of course, if their business fails, they will reclaim the land they left as collateral. The merchants understand that they have nothing to lose. Shylock claps his hands and declares his admiration for the lady's wisdom. He's ready to give her an answer right now, but he needs to discuss it with the other merchants. He asks if the girl will wait. He doesn't say she's prepared to wait as long as necessary for the main game. The merchant bows and thanks her, saying he'll definitely give her an answer she'll like. With a wicked grin on his face, he leaves the estate. The man wonders if the business of the girl, who lived her entire life without knowing troubles, will be successful. He's already making plans to take possession of the best land. Nadia sighs with relief because they're finally gone. The butler asks what business his mistress was talking about, because if they lose the plane, the lady assures Gordon there's nothing to worry about. They'll repay the money as planned. The servant asks why the extra time, and the girl replies that she just wanted to talk to him about it. She orders the butler to invite anyone who wants to postpone the debt repayment to the mansion. She needs to buy something from them. Gordon doesn't understand what his mistress wants to buy, but Nadia reiterates that she wants to open a business. Not everyone can handle something truly important. They need to show what someone who trusts them and is willing to wait will get. When guests arrive at the estate, one of them asks if the business the girl was talking about is the creation of herbal tea from thorny vines. The protagonist calmly states that this is indeed the case and is confident of her success. The guests think she's talking nonsense. The thorny vine is an herb used only by the poor. It has no value. It's just a common weed. Nadia asks if they can buy the herb for her wholesale. Wayne and Katerina are skeptical of this plan. The man says the price of the herb is quite low, but if the girl wants to buy in market volumes, she'll need some capital. And will she have it? The brunette insists she plans to use her dowry, and Wayne chokes on his tea when he hears she plans to buy weed with that money. He looks at the butler and thinks it would be better if the girl stocked up on dresses and jewelry. At least they could be resold. He notices that the butler isn't trying to dissuade his mistress. He seems to have already given in. When the Marchioness spoke so confidently last time, Wayne thought she had a good plan, but he hadn't even considered her so foolish. Katerina asks her to forgive her, but she doesn't think such a business is the best option. The protagonist asks why, and the woman claims that prickly lasagna is worthless, as there are many good herbs that can be substituted. Besides, considering the costs of transportation and storage, they would incur a significant loss. Nadia says they're mistaken about something. She invited them here not for a discussion, but to hire them. The girl is prepared to pay them more than usual. They certainly won't suffer any losses. The guests exchange glances and reply that if the Marquise says so, they'll contact every trading firm on the continent. He thinks securing the required volume of goods won't be a problem. The brunette smiles and says that all hope is only on them. They must take care of everything without exception. 2 months later, Grace comes into the Marquise's room and tells him she heard Nadia hasn't taken care of anything yet except her useless herb. She asks if Glenn will continue to watch her waste her time. The Marquis claims she started this business with her dowry and has no right to interfere. The aunt insists the main character has no financial literacy whatsoever if she believes the herb will bring her money, and asks if she can even be trusted with the household. Soon, the entire debt repayment period will be over. The Marquis puts down his pen and turns to the aunt. Grace says she didn't seem to be watching her language, but asks Glenn to remember one thing. She said it because she was thinking about the family's future. Stalin remains alone in his office, thinking about the day he has to pay off his debts, when he suddenly hears someone running. Gordon bursts into the office and asks if his master has heard the news. Glenn rises from his chair and asks what it is. The butler, breathing heavily as he runs, says they are saved and won't have to give up the plane. He claims it's all thanks to the lady. The Marquis can't believe his ears. In a village in the south, 2 young men are talking about a girl who recently died. Her arm was completely numb. Eventually, she too contracted the plague. One of the men asks if it was just her, as they haven't burned corpses for months. It's not just their village that's suffering, but the entire kingdom, starting with the southern territories. He asks when they'll find a cure. Suddenly, a man runs up to the boys and asks if they've heard the news. A cure for the plague has finally been found. A tea made from thorny vine herbs. They say it can cure the plague. The merchants, hearing this news, immediately decided to stock up on thorny vine herbs. But someone's already bought it all. Now the main character looks at the villagers buying thorny vines. Fabian tells them not to rush, because there's plenty of merchandise. The woman says that she was very worried that her daughter would die. She is grateful that they sold it so cheaply, because usually in such cases the price is greatly inflated, so the poor cannot afford it. The knight claims it's all thanks to the Marquise's generosity. She ensured that everyone could recover. A decree was issued to begin supplying herbal tea at an affordable price. Otherwise, it would be withdrawn from areas where the situation is more serious. Raising prices, reselling, or hoarding the herb are prohibited. Everything was done to mitigate losses among the poor. Now, Nadia is standing on the bridge, talking with Wayne. The man tells the lady of his concerns, that the southern territories will think they deliberately monopolized all the medicine in the north so that the epidemic would flourish there. The Marchioness assures her that this is unlikely. First of all, it wasn't Winterfell that bought up all the vines, says the author standing before her. Besides, the girl is the daughter of the Duke of Balaseth in the south. The thorny vine herb sold faster than expected. As a result, the merchants who had agreed to wait and helped with the business reaped a significant profit. The girl's debt to Katerina was 97,200 gold pieces, while Wayne's was 10,087. Shylock could not believe that she had actually repaid the debt. Moreover, she offered cooperation only to those who agreed to wait. Nadia approaches the merchant, claiming that the conversation with the other merchants didn't seem to go well, even though she was so looking forward to receiving a letter from him. She says that if the guests are all gone, she'll ask only those who helped her with her business to stay, while the rest should leave. She insists that she'll look forward to meeting Mr. Shylock again one day. The merchant says he'll wait too, and until then, may the lady be well. He clenches his fists and leaves. After this, the main character comes to her husband and asks if he believes her now. After increasing her loyalty, she has dealt with her debts. The boy claims she can't see the future, but somehow learned of what would happen. Nadia says that when she was in the south, she accidentally saw a report from the head of the Arrow lands in her father's office, and that's when she assumed the plague would spread throughout the kingdom. The boy asks about a cure. The brunette says the maid who looked after her as a child used to live a nomadic life. She told her stories of her life every night, and once said that the herb of the thorny vine can help with a fatal illness when a fever engulfs the entire body. Of course, this is all a lie. The Marquis apologizes for misunderstanding Nadia. She thanks him for mentioning it. Glenn claims that when she said she'd pay off her debts after she earned the money, he thought she was lying because he doesn't let the protagonist finish his sentence, saying it's because her father is the Duke of Balazit. The Marquis says that's true. He doesn't understand why the girl is helping him. If Nadia's father finds out, he won't like it. The brunette asks how the Marquis listened to her all this time. She claims she's already told him she loves him several times, and asks if he remembers what she told him. Glenn realizes she's started talking about love again. He says that, whatever the reason, she paid off Winterfell's debts. So, if she had a request, he would fulfill it. The main character never thought he would suggest it himself. She would like to say everything that's on her mind, but now she can't. The girl extends her arms and says she wants her husband to embrace her once. The Marquis is surprised by this request, and the girl asks if it's too difficult. He replies that it's not that simple, and that he thought she had another wish, for example, for him to punish the gossiping maids, or to ask for the money she spent to be repaid over time. Nadia insists that if she had used such tactics, she would never have become a member of the Winterfell family, and asks if it wouldn't be better for him to fulfill the request. Glenn realizes he can do this, hugs his wife back, and holds her close. He notices that she smells sweet. Suddenly, someone from the hallway shouts that it's time to leave the business meeting. Nadia thinks what a relief this is. She was worried about how they would stop hugging. She tells her husband she's sorry, but she has to go. The Marquis says everything is fine, and she can go. As the protagonist leaves the room, she thanks Glenn for fulfilling her wish, but she wonders if he's come to trust her now. The girl comes to her servants and asks how things are going. The boys reply that everything is running smoothly thanks to the double-entry bookkeeping their mistress taught them. Wayne, you say you've never heard of it before. Nadia divided expenses and income in half, making it easier to track the flow of money. He asks if the mistress came up with this method herself. The protagonist replies that she's not that smart and learned it from someone who came from far away. The merchant claims he doesn't know where this person is from, but he's simply incredible. Nadia agrees that he knew a lot. The girl recalls sitting with Lee Ji-ho in a past life, asking us what his country was like. The brunette replied that in his world, women and men could receive the same education, and that it was common practice. The main character asked if he was joking. The guy confidently said they used their knowledge to start their own business. They were looking for something they truly wanted to do. The brunette said she wanted to live like that too. Lee Ji-ho placed his hand on hers and told her she was very smart, and that he felt sorry for her for living in her father's shadow her entire life. He insisted he wanted her to have the chance to develop her full talents. Nadia recalls that every time they met, he taught her something new, and thanks to him, she learned to think more broadly. This helped her when she returned to the past and began making plans. But despite this, he abandoned the main character to climb to a higher place. Wayne says the mistress should be careful with Shylock, as he's very cunning and greedy, and won't give in so easily. Nadia tells him not to worry about it, because they know who her father hates most, those who don't pay their taxes on time. The Duke sits in his office and orders an immediate tax audit of the northern merchants and a search for all their assets. When he allowed his daughter's dowry to be used for her foolish business, he couldn't even imagine she would succeed so well. The man wonders if something is wrong here, and how could this be a simple coincidence? He's already beginning to contemplate betrayal. But the Duke dismisses such thoughts. How could she have learned of something unknown to him and come up with such a plan. Nadia was simply lucky. This time, it only played into Winterfell's hands. He clutches the document in his hands, thinking that, in any case, nothing lasts forever. Time will pass, and their budget will be at rock bottom again. By this time, the main character has already finished renovating the estate. The butler is on the verge of tears, claiming it's all thanks to their mistress's business. He's so grateful to her. The girl not only paid off the debt, but also solved the renovation problem. The brunette says their mansion has only become brighter, and that's a good thing. Nadia thinks she can catch her breath now, and says she'll go to her office. It's been tough for her for a while, but now she's done what she had to do, and she feels much better. On the way out, she tells Gordon she has something for him. She points to a bag of money and says it's a special reward for the best butler. He's worked so hard to build a household that never existed. The servant claims this is too much for him and that she should save it for the future. But the protagonist insists that all this time their lands have existed only thanks to the servant's hard work, and their efforts should be rewarded. The brunette says that taking revenge must have often been awkward in front of his subordinates due to salary issues. Now he can maintain his authority by paying them off. The butler is close to tears as he recalls the annual waves of monsters, the constant food shortages, and the problems in the mansion due to mounting debts. He can't believe it was all resolved so easily. Gordon tells him that his mistress is a miracle sent to him by his family's ancestors, and he will honor and care for her for the rest of his life. The protagonist thanks her subordinate. She never thought he would be so loyal to her. The knight tells the butler to stop crying. The protagonist understands that thanks to her successful business, the people have come to trust her, and she must continue in the same spirit to complete her plan. Looking out the window, she notices a red flag and asks what it is. Fabian insists it's the speaker, as the flag is red, meaning the message is urgent. Nadia asks why they're so calm if it's an urgent message, and if he has any idea what happened. He says a red flag at this time means there's a high probability that Count Alteo has crossed the border. Alteo County is located south of Winterfell. It's not part of the Northern Commonwealth or her father's alliance. It's the third power. The girl understands that relations between neighboring territories can be bad, but judging by the reaction of those two, they're clearly hiding something. The main character asks if, by at that time, they meant they do this every year. Apparently, she's spot on. Winterfell has no money, no resources, and they also have crazy neighbors because they don't answer. Nadia sits with her husband and says she heard news about neighbors encroaching on their property. Glenn says that happens sometimes, and she shouldn't worry because he'll be back soon. The brunette says her husband is going to the battlefield, so how can she not be worried? The Marquise looks at her coldly, but then sighs and thinks it would be strange if she didn't worry when her husband goes off to war. It's a normal reaction. Fabian claims that his lady has nothing to worry about. Winterfell's army is the strongest in the north and in the entire kingdom, and the master is the strongest warrior in the entire army. Alteo's low-ranking soldiers are no match for them. Glenn orders his servant to remain silent. The main character sees how confident he is and thinks that in this case she has nothing to worry about. Then maybe she should think about what territories to take from the enemies. And then the girl suddenly realizes that if they always win, then where are the lands? Winterfell, after all, she owns nothing but the northern territories. Alteo happen often, and he insists that's true. Then the protagonist asks why they didn't take the lands, given that they had so many chances. Fabian doesn't know if he can answer this question, but the Marquis says that it is because of the fortress. They win on the battlefield, but as soon as the enemies feel threatened, they hide in the Balong fortress. The knight says his master is right, and they are too vile. He doesn't want to admit it, but Balong fortress is called a gift from heaven. After all, when their enemies hide there, they can't do anything. The knights don't come out, so they surrender and return. The guy sighs and says that most of Alteo's soldiers are mercenaries, but even that doesn't bother them. But they can't turn a blind eye to the fact that they are holding back their citizens who should be farming. The main character remembered everything, because the Balong fortress is known for being located next to a rich source of iron ore. If everything is so, then using this method, they will be able to capture it without any problems. Moreover, not far from this place, they will find the Rio Dragon. The dragon's last appearance was a disaster, but this time, things are different. There is a whole warehouse of treasure there, and its owner has already died. The brown-haired lady thinks that she can't just watch what's happening because he himself gave her a reason, and she won't sit idly by. At this time, one of the servants enters the room and tells the master that it is time to leave. Then the guy gets up from his seat and says, "Okay," and then goes to his bride. He claims he'll be back soon, The young lady thinks he's so confident and talks as if he's going to have fun, not to war. The girl understands that Glenn is an unusual man. She turns to him, and when the guy turns around, she tells him with an innocent expression to be careful and come back soon. Glenn is silent for a moment, then says okay and leaves the room. He heads down the corridor and the knight addresses him. He tells his master that as he saw, their relationship is not so bad. The guy asks if it seemed that way to him, and the knight says that everyone would have said the same. Then the young man turns around, and the servant says not to trust this girl. He understands everything. After all, a beautiful and fragile girl says pleasant words to his master, and it would be strange if he did not begin to feel something for her. But he asks the Marquise not to believe her, and not to give her his heart, because he himself knows the reason well. The silver-haired boy says that of course he knows, but the girl paid off their debts, and he cannot be rude to her. He turns around and says that he doesn't really trust her, and the knight says that in that case, he has nothing to worry about. A few days later, the Marquis is in the Winterfell camp discussing the progress of the war. His companion says everything is going as expected, and their enemies have holed up in the fortress. Therefore, he asks if they should recall the army. Glenn thinks about it, and the man says that if he doesn't want to, then they can try to take the fortress. He claims that the Count's army has suffered on the battlefield and will need time to replenish its numbers. The protagonist understands that he wants this too. However, he says that it is not necessary because the guy does not want to risk the lives of soldiers in a battle that has a high probability of failure. Then the man says that if this is what his master wants, then they will do it. But suddenly, some shouts are heard from outside. The knights shout that entry is prohibited. The man says it's noisy outside and he'll go check it out. The Marquis says there's no need, since he just wanted some fresh air, so let the guy rest. But when he heads for the door, he hears the knight shouting at the man to wait and claiming that this is putting them in a difficult situation. However, when Glenn opens the tent entrance, he sees a familiar face. He asks if it's Nadia. The girl just looks back at him. Then the protagonist wonders why she's there. But the young lady just throws off her hood and tells Glenn that they haven't seen each other for a long time, and that's why she misses him. The guy is a little surprised by this, and the main character says that thank God he is fine, and what a relief it is. The young man thinks that maybe a couple of days ago, she didn't wish him a safe journey. He understands that the war is going according to plan, and he was already thinking about returning home, so he has no idea what's going on in her head. The guy wonders if she could have come there because she was worried about him, but then he sighs and thinks that this can't be true. After which, he turns around and suggests they go inside first. Then the young lady sits down at the table with a map, and Glenn asks why she came. His wife replies that she's written a military request. The young man, shocked, asks what she's talking about. The young lady says she has found a way to capture Belong Fortress, but it seems they don't believe her. As the Marquise thought, she did not come there out of concern for him, but he thinks that this is something to be glad about. The boy puts his hand to his head, thinking that the very fact that he even thought about it infuriates him. He asks if she knows what a military request means in wartime. And the main character says that the price for a false report is execution, and she knows it. She also adds that she told the truth, so she has nothing to worry about. Then the man turns to her and says that, judging by her confidence, it seems this method will bring them victory. So he suggests they see how good the plan is. The protagonist thanks Lord Giscard, and she says she'll start then. She points to the map and says they should build a mountain to the west and dig a cave in another area to the north. The mountain will be a trap, so it doesn't need to be fully built. The most important thing is the cave. They need to place a lot of gunpowder and oil underground and set it all on fire. When the cave collapses, the fortress will fall with it, and then they will be able to capture the enemies at once. The guy realizes that in a situation where they don't know how to take the fortress, a cave is a good option. He claims they hadn't even considered it, but there's a lot of granite in the area, and they've already checked the terrain. The young lady says there's no need to worry about that, and she saw information about the Belong Fortress's weak point in her father's office. It said there's a lot of soft rock on the fortress's server, so there shouldn't be any problems. The boy understands that the problem with the Belong Fortress was a headache for his ancestors, and if they simply retreat now, it will come up again someday. But if Nadia is telling the truth, they will be able to end it once and for all. The young lady claims she can vouch for the materials her father collected in case anyone became his enemy, and the Lord says the Duke of Balazith must have plenty of such papers. But he asks if the young lady isn't from the Balazit family herself. The man thinks there's nothing he likes about her. But suddenly, Glenn turns to Lord Giscard and asks if the problem with the Balong fortress has bothered the Lord as much as it has bothered him. But if the girl told the truth, then this could be their chance, so he says to send people to the north. It wouldn't be that hard to check if there really was a lot of softwood there. Then the man agreed. And the main character says that since the young lady is ready to put her life on the line, he doesn't think that she is deceiving them. The young woman claims she knew it, because her husband is the only one who trusts her. The guy is a little shocked by these words, thinking that's not what he meant. But the main character just grabs his hand and tells him to take care of himself and consider this her order. A little while later, the Lord looks at the ruined fortress. He thinks that this cannot be, and the girl did not lie. When they enter the fortress, they see the owner of those lands there. He cries out in fear, saying he had said he was surrendering. He also asks if the Marquis of Winterfell knows about aristocratic pride, because even if he is his prisoner, he is still a nobleman, so Glenn must follow aristocratic laws. But the guy just puts a knife to his throat and asks if he talks about pride and laws. After all, not even half a year had passed. Since the Winterfell army returned from the Kalia expedition, the soldiers sacrificed themselves for the kingdom, and the Count, without even giving them a rest, declares a new war. The young man asks if this is what he calls pride. His interlocutor replies that he still cannot kill the nobleman, for fear he will harm him. But suddenly someone interrupts him and says that Count Alteo is right, because even though the Marquis won the war, he cannot take the life of his enemy. Then she approaches Alteo and asks what about the fact that the Count, having lost and been captured, committed suicide out of shame. After all, this is the only way to preserve an aristocrat's pride. The man is shocked by this, wondering if the girl is crazy. And then he bows down and thinks that at this rate, he really could soon die. So he cries out to the boy to spare him, and if they let him live, he'll give them all his riches. Then the young lady hands him a non-aggression pact and says that if he signs it, they will spare his life. When the guy reads this, he's shocked. It says, firstly, that the county of Altea has been attacking me on the lands of Winterfell for 30 years. Secondly, that as the losing side, they will pay 100,000 gold pieces. And thirdly, that the county of Altea will hand over all rights to the lands of the Rhine, including the fortress of Balong. After this, the young lady tells him not to even think about discussing the points, and then asks why he is sitting. And he insists he better sign quickly. After this, the Knights of Winterfell celebrate. One of them says she feels better, now that they've finally settled this protracted territorial war, and the other insists he's right. He asks if his friend saw the Count's expression when the girl pulled out the contract. The guy says that he couldn't even imagine that in the mountainous area it would be possible to find a loophole, and the one who suggested it was the lady. Lord Giscard listens to all this in silence, while the knights propose a drink to the lady. The main character thinks that first there was the thorny vine, and now the war, but the girl helped them with everything. At first he thought she only got close to him because she was sent to spy, but she is completely different. The young man asks the knight why he doesn't see Nadia, and he, chewing a piece of meat, says that the lady said that she was very tired and wanted to rest in her room. The young lady, meanwhile, is sitting in her room, thinking about how she can discreetly hint to the guy about the dragon's location. The first option is that she'll say she found it by chance while passing by, but its habitat is deep in the mountains, so the main character considers the possibility that her ancestor appeared to her in a dream and told her about it. But the girl understands that this is not very impressive, but suddenly she hears someone knocking on the door. The young lady thinks that she is already warned that she is resting and does not understand who it could be, but she says to come in. It turns out it's the Marquis. The girl says that she thought he was celebrating with everyone. You ask what brought him there. Glenn asks if it wasn't thanks to her that they were able to win, and if she thinks it would be better to go out to the soldiers. The protagonist says she thinks he's right. Then her husband extends his hand to her, and the young lady wonders whether he will accompany her and why he himself suggested it. The main character just calmly says that she's in trouble, and the guy wonders what she's talking about. The young lady merely smiles and says that everything is fine. As they walk down the hallway, the young man claims he heard Fabian say she was tired and wanted to rest in her room. But it turns out the girl wasn't asleep. The young lady says that if that's what he's talking about, she couldn't sleep, thinking about new territories. After all, they finally got them, and of course, she had to think about how to use them. The guy says this, and the young lady continues and says that the mine is of particular importance because iron ore production will increase because of it. But suddenly, she stumbles and nearly falls. But her husband immediately catches her. The young lady then thanks him and says that she seems to have relaxed too much, as she could have stopped worrying about him and his safety. And she herself thinks that this is unexpected. Why did she twist her leg? But what is more important? That's why his face is so close. The main character says he can let her go now, and he does so and tells her to be careful. The lady with brown hair thinks that he first offers to walk her out, and now this, so it is noticeable that the atmosphere has somehow changed. When they enter the room with the knights, they are already completely drunk. One of them exclaims that Count Alteo's confused expression was so funny. The young lady, however, realizes it's like a marketplace. The knights, seeing that their mistress has arrived, are surprised and immediately begin to sing for their mistress. The young lady smells the fumes of alcohol wafting from them and greets them. She realizes the knights are all drunk. The girl, of course, knew this would happen, which is why she didn't want to come. Glenn says that they seem to be too happy about the end of the long war, so he asks the young lady to understand them. Then someone approaches the main character. It turns out to be Lord Giscard. He says he wants to say something. The young lady thinks that's exactly it, because she wanted to point something out, so the girl says she's listening to him. The man kneels before her and apologizes for his doubts. The main character certainly didn't expect this. She calmly asks the Lord to stand up and claims that she understands perfectly well why he did not trust her, as he said she was from the Balazit family. But she says that now she is with the Marquis's wife, and her reputation is Glenn's reputation, and the knight's bad behavior towards her is tantamount to damaging the reputation of their leader, whom they serve. The boy turns to his wife and says that Lord Giscard behaved this way out of deep devotion to their family, and he will be careful that this does not happen again. Well, the young lady says that she will not assert her authority only at the expense of others, so she herself will give him a fitting punishment. The Lord agrees and says that he understands perfectly well how much the group was with her, so he will gladly accept any punishment. The main character only says that it will be hard for him to bear the punishment alone, but if he shares it, the burden will not be so heavy. The knights are already a little scared. They ask what the lady's talking about. One of the knights thinks that he didn't even suspect that their lady was such a person. But the lady with brown hair only says that each of them will be punished, and everyone without exception must drink a penalty. The knights are completely shocked by this, and then smile and say that they can handle this. Another knight says that the lady is also quite a joker. Nadia claims that she is glad that they are happy. She waves her hand to the maid and asks if she can bring what she asked for. Then the maid brings even more barrels of alcohol. The knights, shocked by this, don't ask their mistress if she thinks it's too much, especially since it's all quite strong alcohol. The young lady just smiles and says that this is how the penalty area should look. She then turns to the commander and says she'll pour him one herself. The man thanks her, realizing everyone took the situation as a joke, but it's not quite that way. After all, in this way, the girl points out his rudeness, attracting the soldiers' attention. Moreover, she makes everyone remember that she is above them. The guy starts drinking alcohol and thinks that this girl is definitely not so simple, and perhaps a noble person has actually appeared in the north. The young lady tells the next one to come forward. Then the black-haired knight cries out to be allowed in, but the knight in front of him asks if he's not mistaken, as he's standing in line. The young lady Lishu smiles and tells them not to worry. There is enough for everyone. Glenn watches his wife and can't help but smile. That same night, someone sneaks into the office where the documents are. It turns out to be the main character. She puts a piece of paper into the stack and says that everyone in this family, even the ancestors, should thank her. A little while later, the girl screams that this document talks about the dragon Rayo. The servants are shocked by this. One of them says that they only just received these lands, and then such a disaster happened. The Marquis says that he did say that everything went suspiciously smoothly, but because of the dragon, they won't be able to get rid of these lands, so he says that they need to come up with something. The young lady says that it seems he shouldn't worry, because it says there that the dragon's owner died long ago. And apparently, Count Alteo only received the report and has not yet had time to begin excavations, so all the rare items have been accumulated for the dragon now theirs. The Marquis is shocked and wonders why something good happens so often, because he has never been so lucky. The young lady looks at him and thinks that he must not believe in such great luck, and thinks that of course he does, because it's all thanks to her. Then the young man asks how she read this document, and the knight adds that they also saw it, but decided to skip it, since they did not understand Count Alteo's scribbles. The protagonist is shocked, wondering if, even though she wrote with her left hand, it really is that incomprehensible. Now the young lady understands why no one has said a word about him for 4 days. The young lady laughs and says that her father has similar handwriting and she has been used to it since childhood, so it would be better not to send a search party too quickly, because it would be better to find out the scale of what is happening before returning to Winterfell. Glenn says that she only has different talents. The young lady does not understand what he is talking about, and he just turns around and orders Anils to quickly send a detachment to search for the dragon. A little while later, the boy stands on a hill and looks at the fertile land that is now his property. But there is one problem. Anils turns to his master and says that, "I have enough farmers because of this. Most of the fields are idle." Because the Count of Altay extorted large taxes from the farmers who rented the land. People began to die of hunger in the spring, when there was a shortage of food, and eventually simply fled the county. When the agricultural season begins, he will be able to strengthen his forces and prepare for civil war. But even if he forces those farmers to move to these lands, there will still not be enough labor in such vast spaces. One of the servants approaches the master and asks how it would be possible for Togo to bring back the farmers who fled from the county. After all, if he gives the order, he'll lead an army and turn the entire region upside down. The peasants have likely created their own village and are living there. The young lady, however, claims that if they force them to return, it will affect the Marquise's reputation. She asks if it wouldn't be better to employ homeless people, as then they could easily solve the problem of labor shortage. Glenn says it's not a bad idea, but will they want to settle there? Because even if he lowers taxes, they won't trust him so easily. Because from their point of view, Alteo is a terrible territory, and the truth only becomes obvious after some time. The young lady just remains silent, and the guy doesn't even guess what she's thinking about again. He then approaches her and says that Nadia must have an idea. The young lady realizes he's asking her opinion, but doesn't understand why. She asks if it's noticeable on her face. The girl asserts that if he lends her his sword, she thinks she can solve the problem. Glenn asks why she needs the sword. He understands that this sword is the head sword, passed down in the Winterfell family from generation to generation. So what does the young lady intend to do with it? Then the Marquis places his hand on his sheathed sword and approaches her. The protagonist thanks him, but the boy merely passes by her and hands the sword to the knight. Nadia turns around, not understanding what's wrong, and her husband just says that the sword is too heavy and it will be difficult for her to carry it, and Fabian will become her hands and feet, so let her just order him around. The main character claims she's not that weak, but the Marquis merely says she seemed lighter to him than he thought. Nadia doesn't understand what he's talking about, but then the realization dawns on her that he might be talking about that day. Now the young lady understands that, as she thought, something has changed in Glenn. A short time later, two men are sitting in a diner. One of them asks if the other has heard about that story. The other gestures to ask what he's talking about. Then the blonde guy says that the whole village is talking about it, but he still doesn't know the story about Peter and the 10 bars of gold. One day, a new ruler appeared in the county of Alteo. The new leader hung an interesting sign near the fortress gate, promising 10 gold bars to whoever headed the ball out. Everyone wanted to get their hands on the gold, but no one could reach the leader's sword. One woman from the village cried out that this was a test from the chieftain, and that this sword was no ordinary one, but the chieftain's own property, and he was testing whether the new residents would dare touch his belongings. The other villagers agreed. But that day, a brave young man appeared and cried out that he would try to pull out the chief's sword, after which he did so. Then one of the chief's servants came out to him. The villagers were a little worried about this. They almost buried the young man. The lord approached him and asked if he was the one who pulled out the head sword, and then told him to kneel down and accept the reward from the leader. It was a chest with 10 gold bars. The leader's promises was greatly rewarded and lived happily. That's the end of the story. The boy says what happened is simply unbelievable, and his interlocutor says the new leader is different from Count Alteo and isn't one to speak ambiguously. The man also claims to have heard that this story has spread to other villages and that Belong Fortress is once again filled with peasants. But suddenly, one of the guys screams and offers them a drink because the new head promised to significantly reduce taxes, so this year they will live well. Everyone in the diner is overjoyed about this, and at that moment, servants run up to the main character. One of them claims that the head of the peasants is on his knees asking for permission to return. The second one reports on the repair of the broken weapon. The brown-haired lady smiles and speaks kindly. Glenn watches his wife. He thinks that the girl is so energetic, as if she is offended by her past life. He does not understand why she, sparing no effort, deals with the affairs of Winterfell. Although the young lady says that it is because of her love for him, then why is she not interested in him at all? At this time, one of the servants bursts into the room and says that they have finally found the diagram of the Balong fortress. When they look at the plan, the Marquis claims that the walls are very strong and that the inside of the building resembles a labyrinth. He claims that the previous owner was very careful and that this must be how he protected himself from the invasion of strangers. The young lady understands that they were the strangers. She thinks that the Balong fortress is called the Iron Fortress because there are many secret places inside, and perhaps one of them contains the treasure hidden by Count Alteo, so everything needs to be checked. But, frankly speaking, they have a goal that is more important than treasures, because in the past, Alteo, together with the dwarves, sold high-quality steel items. These were materials, weapons, and even household items. The young lady understands that they would be of great help in the development of Winterfell. So now, with the plan of the fortress, she thinks that it seems all the secret rooms have been found. But, unfortunately, there are no traces of the dwarves, and even signs that they collaborated. Suddenly, the young lady bumps into her husband's back and asks for forgiveness, because she was lost in thought. She asks Glenn what happened, but he just says that it's all a bit strange, because the path is blocked, but there is a gap, and the wall is a little shabby. The guy looks at it and puts his hand on it. He thinks that maybe there is a passage behind it, and when he opens it, he sees a passage to the stairs inside. When the young lady goes there, she realizes that there is a room with the wall. No matter how much she looks, she does not see any difference, so she wonders how he knew. The knight says this place isn't on the map and that it's somehow suspicious, and Glenn suggests they go down. As the protagonist descends the stairs, she sees traces of red liquid on the walls, and when they finally reach the very bottom, they see a forge. Glenn wonders why Alteo hid it in a place like this. The main character looks at the weapons. She takes one of the daggers in her hands and understands that it is handmade. The young man approaches her and says that he might be sent away, so the girl better not touch anything there. The young lady says fine and thanks her for the advice. Glenn thinks that this is strange, and has Alteo's weapons always been of such high quality, since this dagger is much stronger and lighter than their weapons? The knight turns to his master and says that he hears some sounds behind the door, and they are similar to the sounds of half-dead people. Then the Marquis approaches the door, and the young lady thinks that they have found a forge hidden in the dungeon and high-quality weapons. But what if there is something else behind this door? Glenn says he will check and orders the knight not to leave the lady. Fabian says it's been several days since they took over the fortress. Are there really people left there? What if they're not people, but ghosts? The young man tells him to simply stand near the lady, after which he kicks down the door and goes inside. The guy sees something resembling a prison inside. Someone screams from the cage that he will do as the master orders and claims that he was wrong. When the Marquis approaches the cage, he sees several people chained there, and he realizes that they are dwarves. The young lady sees red stains on their clothes and wonders what happened there and why they are chained in such a place. One of the dwarves asks for mercy. He cries out that last time they committed a terrible sin. Alteo sent the boy, but he claims they simply came to see the human world, and that's true. The Marquis understands that his enemy also exploited the dwarves. The author asks the master what they should do. Then the guy says that he will deal with it personally. The main character thinks about what he is talking about and becomes a little wary. Her husband kicks down the door and goes inside, reaching for his sword. The dwarf is very frightened by this, but the guy just swings with a serious expression. The main character is shocked by this. She immediately hugs her husband from behind and asks him to wait. The young man asks what she's doing, and Nadia says they can't be killed because they are merely victims exploited by Count Alteo. The dwarves are still in shock. Glenn asks why the girl would even think of such a thing. The young lady, shocked, asks if he wasn't planning on doing it, because if so, then why would he even have a sword? But the guy swung his sword with such a serious expression that it was hard not to think the worst. The young man only cuts the chains and says that he wanted to free them. The Marquis then states that his name is Glenn, and he is the new head of the county, so the guy asks if they could tell what Alteo did to them. The gnome looks at him and says that they themselves didn't expect things to turn out this way. They wanted to see the world and try to create new things in it using their resources and skills. Thinking about this, they went outside, but no one was happy to see them. The people in the village only screamed that they were monsters. Another dwarf told Mr. Miar that this was the last house and maybe they should go to another village. In addition, they had a sick baby with them, but they were only busy running away from people and no one helped them. Then they found themselves in the forest, trying to find shelter from the rain. She insisted there were no signs of it stopping and asked what they should do. Miar thought that if this continued, not only the child would be in danger, but everyone else as well. He wished there was a place where they could hide from the rain for a while. So he insisted he'd go to the fortress, because if their lava lived there, maybe he'd take pity on them. Another dwarf said he'd also go with the master. Then Miar came to the fortress to the Lord, and kneeling, asked him to help them until the child's fever subsided. The owner of the fortress thought what kind of abomination this was, and he assumed that they had a serious matter. But it turned out that everything was completely different, so he wondered who let these beggars into the fortress. Then he asks the knight about it. He claims it was the new guard who did it, but the Lord says he doesn't need to know. Then he orders his hands cut off and banished along with the brat. One of the dwarves begged the master not to drive them away, because they did not have many things with them, but they would do everything and let him listen to them first. The knight simply grabbed him by the collar and asked why he was so persistent, which caused the dwarf to drop the cup from his hands. The count, when he picked it up, told the knight to leave them. He did not understand where they got such a precious thing from, and they probably stole it. That's why the guy says it's very suspicious that they have such a rare thing. He asks if the dwarves stole it, and they say that the Lord misunderstood, and that they made the cup themselves. Alteo doesn't know where they came from, but they seem to have skills, and if they're good at something, they could be useful. That's how the dwarves got into the fortress. Alteo said they could stay there while they did whatever he said. He locked them in the basement to protect them from any possible threats. We didn't object, though, as we wanted to stay there until the child recovered. However, when Miar thanked the Lord for everything he had done and said that the child had gone, so they were leaving, Alteo's reaction surprised him. The Lord said that he picked them up too, but they were so ungrateful. He asked if they wanted to leave the fortress and said that it was nonsense. Miar asks if he himself didn't say that they could stay there until the baby recovers, if I do whatever he wants. After all, they no longer need to stay there. The guy looked at the weapon and said that as the head of the territory, he was obliged to protect the local residents, and if people like them broke into the village, it would be a disaster. While they were there, they learned to craft weapons, so how could he know what they would do with that knowledge once they left the fortress? Then the Lord said he had to deal with them. Miar wonders what he's talking about, and whether he really didn't intend to let them go from the start. Another dwarf says that all this time he's given them neither food nor time to rest. He grabs a hammer and asks what Alteo is talking about now. The head of the gnome screams at Dihi not to do this. But the Lord merely knocks the hammer out of the dwarf's hands, causing him to fall. The leader of the dwarves immediately runs to his relative. The man asks how he can let go of those who tried to harm even their benefactor. Now Miar says that after this, the new owner of the lands found them imprisoned and dying of hunger. Glenn says that it would have been better if they had found them earlier, but he tells us that it is not their fault and that only that person is to blame for everything. The guy claims that he will compensate them for everything they have suffered and provide treatment until they fully recover. Miar says they don't need money, and that's not why he told him everything. She tells us they'll gladly accept treatment and return to where they came from. The protagonist looks on with a slightly sad expression. She understands that these are people who don't belong in this world, who have never been accepted, and who, moreover, have had their faith betrayed. The young lady seems to understand exactly what they're feeling, and so she must do something to prevent them from ending up in the same situation as she did. The girl claims that it would be a shame if they just went back, because they went out to see the world, but so far they haven't really seen it, because this world is so huge. So the young lady, with a smile on her face, invites them to come along with them. She claims that she will show them the scale of this world in Winterfell, and they will experience it together. The gnome tries to object. He thinks that if it is the same there, no one will be next to them, and they will be forced to work again. But Nadia just leans towards him and says that she guarantees that no one will kidnap or ban them again. She also says that they will pay them and give them leave so that they can explore all the territories to their heart's content. She says that, of course, she does not force them, and if they do not want to, they can refuse, but she would be very glad if they lived in them, because their lands need talented craftsmen like them. The girl thinks that in the past, she would also have wanted to be consoled like this, in a house where no one needed her. Miar wonders if they need them, and Glenn says he feels the same way. He says he understands well, they're afraid something like this could happen again. But he claims that they don't have to worry, because as the new head, he guarantees their freedom and security. The gnomes look at each other, and then their leader turns around and says that it seems like everyone thinks the same. Then the Marquis extends his hand and says it's a good decision, and that first they should recover, and then they'll talk about where they'll live. The young man says he'll take care of them. A little while later, a knight bursts into the room of the Marquis and Marquise. He shouts to the master that they have completed the inspection of the iron ammunition. As the lady said, they are incredible, and invites the gentleman to just look at this quality. The marquis says that he told her to test them, and not to put them on himself, and the knight says that in any case the result is good. He asks how the young lady came up with this idea, but it always turns out as she says. The main character understands that, to be honest, these are not her ideas, but she says that she has been thinking about this for a long time, but there was no chance to test it. And then they hired dwarven craftsmen and found iron ore. Everything was perfect for trying. Nadia realizes that iron armor is much stronger than regular armor, but this will become known later. Based on someone's future, the young lady knows all this only because she's already lived it. Glenn turns to his wife and says that if they can distribute this armor to others, their army's defenses will increase 100-fold. She tells the protagonist that, of course, that's what she wanted to do. She claims that she ran there for this reason, and when they return to Winterfell, they will be able to improve the weapon too. The guy thinks his wife is the one whose thoughts he can't read. The young lady thinks everything is ready. She sips tea and realizes that with the money from the dragon and the thorny vine, territory and food in the Rhine region, and an army fully equipped with iron armor and weapons, this place will soon be on par with the South. The girl thinks the Duke and her sister are facing a sad final moment. Someone tells the lady they're coming in. "It's Fabian," he says. He brought the item she mentioned. The protagonist thanks him, and the guy says he found the most famous craftsman in the Rhineland. He asks if she knows how hard it was to make. He also asks why the lady needs this, because he doesn't think that she will use it herself. The young lady claims it's for a gift, believing it's the first time she's given a gift to anyone. In her past life, she didn't have anyone of her own to care for, and naturally, she never received gifts from anyone either. Come to think of it, he did give her something once. The girl remembers her sister screaming at how much it irritated her. And why does the maid's daughter get more attention than her? It was a day when Karain was angry at her sister as usual. And all because the dress she wore to the ball attracted more attention than her outfit. She herself had thrown the dress to her as a handout. The young lady thought that if she kept quiet, she would soon calm down. The blonde simply cried out, wondering if her sister was ignoring her. Nadia thinks Karain always took her out on her, and at some point, she'd resorted to physical violence, so she was expecting it. And then the main character's husband passed by, and when he noticed this action, he grabbed the blonde by the hand. He asked what Lady Karen was doing now. The blonde told him not to interfere and to go where he was going, because it was the sister's personal business. The brunette asks if it's personal, and then turns to the young lady and says that then he too might have a personal matter with her. He then takes the main character by the hand and says he needs Lady Nadia. The brown-haired lady didn't understand what was happening and told Lord Jiho to wait, but he only continued to lead her along. The blonde remained alone in the room while the couple went to a restaurant. Jiho insisted that red suited Nadia very well. The main character thanked him. She thought he'd suddenly given her a new dress and invited her to dinner. Even though they were married, even when they bumped into each other, they didn't really talk to each other. The guy simply says the place is popular among lovers and asks if the young lady has ever been there. Nadia said she was always stuck at home and never had the opportunity, but now she understands why there are so many people there. The young man points to the food and says he talks too much, so he'll let the girl try it before it gets cold. The main character agrees, and when he tries the dish, he thinks how delicious it is. The brunette says he's happy. They always say from TV series that the most important thing on a first date is food. The young lady asks what he's talking about and suggests he eat quickly. Meanwhile, she's wondering what TV series he's talking about. The guy insists he's finished and likes how well Nadia eats. The main character, however, reflects that, if you look at it, the most important thing is how they look to others. She remembers how her sister said that Lord Jiho probably doesn't know how to use cutlery because they are on the same level. She laughed and said it was the first time she'd seen anyone handle a knife so ignorantly. Now the young lady understands that, had she seen Lord Jiho's poor table manners, most would have condemned him. The brown-haired man says her question might seem rude, but she wonders if she can ask it anyway. Lord says of course she can. Then the main character points out that he's not used to table manners. She says she didn't mean to ruin his mood. And he just came from another world, so she thought this was possible. The guy clenches his fist and says that everything is correct. He claims that no one looked after him in his house, so he ate as he pleased. But apparently, when others see him eating, they make fun of not only him, but also the young lady. The main character is a little shocked by this. She offers if he doesn't mind teaching him. After they've eaten, they head home. The guy says he had a great time thanks to her, and that this place really is as incredible as everyone says. Then the young man asks her something. He claims to be very embarrassed, but then asks the girl if she has ever experienced discrimination. The main character asks what he's talking about, and he adds that he's interested in whether there's discrimination among the nobility. The brunette says he thought that in this world, only outsiders like him are treated differently, and the main character realizes that, if she thinks about it, he's right. Despite his extraordinary abilities, he's ignored simply because he's an outsider and was even forced to marry his illegitimate daughter. The young lady was born into this world, and although she is not loved, everyone knows whose blood flows in her, and there is only one guy in this world. So the main character says it must be hard for him. The brunette is silent at first. Then he takes her hand in his and says she should feel the same way. He asks if she wants to meet again and says he'll tell her how to read the stars. Nadia asks if there's a special way to do it. The guy says that, of course, and if you look at the stars long enough, you can learn a lot, like the weather, the terrain, and the best time for farming. The main character asks if this is what they teach in their world and says it's quite interesting. Then the brunette asks if she can come to their next meeting wearing the clothes he gave her. The young lady smiles and agrees. Now she thinks she's been succumbing to useless memories. So the girl tries to forget it, because no matter what happened, in the end, he betrayed her too. He hurt her just as much as she trusted him. Meanwhile, the boy sits, looking at the stars and thinking about Nadia. Meanwhile, the Duke, in his office, can't calm down. He slams the table and cries out whether the Marquis of Winterfell has captured Baelong Keep. He screams, "What did that idiot Alteo do that they took the fortress from him?" The servant says it seems Winterfell dug a tunnel under the fortress and blew it up. The Duke is shocked, wondering how the Marquis could have known the precise location of the soft rock to destroy the walls. But suddenly, he realizes Glenn couldn't have known such secret information. He wonders if Winterfell has been blessed with good fortune ever since Nadia married the Marquis, and if it is just a coincidence. The Duke understands that near the fortress of Baelong are the most fertile lands of the Rhine, and this is a place that can withstand the south. He realizes that it remained untouched by Alteo as they periodically confronted Winterfell in wars. The blonde man asks if there has been any news from his daughter, but the servant claims that there has not been any news, and the first mistress never contacted them. Isn't it a good thing that Lord Jiho succeeded in the military campaign of Gadabir, because now everyone in the capital is talking about him? They even nicknamed him Dragon Hunter. That proves it's true, and it's comforting that at least he's fulfilling his role. But the blonde has a bad feeling and knows he needs to find out for sure. He tells the rumor mill to bring some writing paper because he needs to know about the well-being of his daughter, whom he hasn't seen in a long time. Glenn, meanwhile, is heading somewhere on horseback. The knights inform their master that the outskirts of Winterfell are finally visible. This outskirts is the village of Topu, and the poor live there. The residents there shout joyfully because the master has returned. The residents see fruit in one of the carts. The woman says how many expensive fruits there are, and her son asks what they are, and says that they are so bright and look very tasty, so he wants to try them. The main character gets out of the carriage. She takes one of the apples and hands it to the boy. The girl, with a smile on her face, claims that today they have only a few of them, but soon they will be able to eat them all the time. The child, in shock, asks if they are really giving him this precious fruit, and then thanks the lady. Glenn suggests they take a short break in this village. He understands that just a few months ago, hunger made it difficult to see a smile on their faces. But in a short time, the situation improved. The guy understands that when they return to the mansion, he should properly thank Nadia. But then the girl turns to him and says that the day has come when they will return to the mansion. The young lady says with a smile on her face that time flies very quickly. The guy looks at her in a bit of shock. The brown-haired lady wonders why he's staring at her like that and wonders if there's something on her face. She says she just wanted to tell him something before they left and claims that when they arrive at Winterfell, the procession, the young man doesn't even listen. He's wondering why he didn't notice before that the girl is quite beautiful. He realizes that she is not at all like her father. He, of course, thought that she was not ugly. But the young lady breaks him out of his thoughts and asks if Glenn is listening. He immediately apologizes and says he was lost in thought. Then, Nadia insists she was talking about the ceremony of returning to Winterfell and his place in the procession. The boy puts his hand on his head and says he's already forgotten, then says she'll enter the grounds with him. The young lady remembers something important and says that she wanted to tell him earlier, but she didn't want to be seen, so it would be better for her to stay in the carriage. The young man asks what she's talking about, because the success in this war is her merit, and she should be treated accordingly. But the main character interrupts him and says that if rumors start to spread that she returned with him on the same horse, then won't her father begin to suspect her, because they might start calling her a double spy. She claims that someday there will come a day when they will use what her father trusts her with, so she suggests preserving this opportunity. The silver-haired guy puts his hand on his head and says that there is no need to go to such lengths, because it is true that he and Duke Balazit are political opponents, but isn't he the girl's family? He claims that he would never ask her to stab members of his family in the back, and he would never involve her in his dealings with the duchy. But Nadia objects. She says that in the near future, there will be a serious confrontation between the North and the South, and she thinks that Glenn himself guesses about this. She claims that if she suddenly had to choose between the two of them, she would choose Glenn. The guy is shocked by this, but then he turns away and says that maybe she thinks so now, but if the girl harms her family with her own hands, it will become a scar for life. And in other words, he doesn't intend to drag her into the war between them. The main character thanks the Marquise for his words. Well, she claims it's not difficult for her to help them. The young lady says a little shyly that she likes Glenn and wants to help the man she loves. The guy is embarrassed by this, but then immediately turns away. He wonders if all Southern girls confess their feelings so easily. He says he understands the girl and it's time to go, so let her get into the carriage. The young lady says fine and adds that they'll see each other later. And she wonders if the guy just got embarrassed. She thinks that the more she looks at him, the cuter he becomes. At this time in the mansion, a woman asks if the butler can leave her a seal and whether he will really behave like this. The man apologizes and says that he cannot handle the lady's seal so carelessly. But the woman only turns to Gordon and says that just a couple of months ago, she was managing the mansion's household, and, to be more precise, she was also the butler, but now the man doesn't trust her. Gordon says he is grateful to her for her help, but that was then, and now the Winterfell mansion has a mistress. The woman smiles and says this, and it only means that now the mansion has a real owner. She claims that the truth cannot be hidden, and servants everywhere are whispering that the Marquise has not been seen for several days. Therefore, the woman turns to Gordon and suggests that he tell her who should take over the family's household when his mistress so irresponsibly leaves her place. The butler is a little shocked by this, and the woman continues and asks if he thinks it is too suspicious that she disappeared when Glenn left, and she must have fled while she had the chance, because the woman is sure that something bad happened in Winterfell. Then she asks if the butler has forgotten that the girl is from the Balazit family, but he doesn't answer. And then he says that he understands her concerns, and he didn't want to say this, but the lady is now with the gentleman. The woman, in shock, asks since when she has been with Glenn, and then shouts that even if so, it does not make her less suspicious. And who knows what aces she has up her sleeve. The butler says it's possible, but as for the household, the mistress will handle that personally. The woman is in complete shock, wondering what this girl did that made the butler so unquestioningly take her side. She cries out how Glenn still hasn't sent her back, since she was definitely in his way. Gordon says he doesn't know, and that they'll be back soon, so she should ask the gentleman herself. The woman asks what he's talking about, and he insists the Marquise will be home soon. At this time, Glenn returns to his mansion, and everyone congratulates him on his victory. His aunt also meets him, and says what a relief it is that he returned safely. The guy asks his aunt if she came out to meet him, and claims that he returned. The woman just says with a smile on her face that this is incredible and a truly great achievement. She also says that the Marquise also came with him, and how good it is that she is all right. The woman says she was very surprised to hear that she left the mansion and went to war, because how could a girl go to such a dangerous place? She looks at the young lady and decides to listen to how she will justify herself. But the girl only innocently says that she simply missed the Marquise so much that she could not stand it any longer. The Marquise's aunt just thinks what nonsense this is, and the knights behind her say how romantic it is. Glenn is a little embarrassed, and the woman thinks, what kind of nasty girl is this, because she decided to get out of the situation like this. Therefore, the aunt says that if the girl loves the Marquise so much, she should have thought about his situation, because surely she didn't realize that her presence on the battlefield could only hinder him. The young lady only sadly replies that her aunt is right and that she is so stupid. What if someone addresses a woman? Auntie sees him and thinks that such a devoted man as Giscard will definitely say something useful, because he has accumulated dissatisfaction due to the fact that she came to the military camp, and in this case, he will say something caustic. But he only tells Mrs. Grace to watch her words, because there are many eyes there, so let her be kind to the Marquise. The woman is completely shocked by these words, and the man continues and says that the marquise put herself in danger out of concern for her master, and on the battlefield she was responsible, so Lady Grace need not worry. The woman doesn't even know what to say. She understands that now it is not someone else, but Giscard himself who is protecting Balazit's daughter. The other knights say that this is true, and aren't they newlyweds? And another knight says that when the master met the lady, his strength returned. The woman thinks that they are all out of their minds, and yet just recently, everyone ignored her because they considered her a spy of Balazit. Glenn turns to his aunt and says that although they are related, his wife is now the mistress of Winterfell, so his aunt should not forget the basic things. The woman understands that Glenn is going there too, and the guy claims that they are tired after a long journey, so they will go first. After that, the two of them leave, and the aunt realizes that Glenn is covering for Balazit's daughter, and he shamed her, and it's obvious that something is wrong there. The woman understands that if everything goes on like this, the girl will finally take over all the power, and when she seizes power, and also gives birth to an heir, her position will weaken, and the aunt cannot allow this. The main character lies down on the bed. She thinks how tired she is, and they say that playing a woman in love is much harder than winning a war. But she thinks about it, and it seems to her that Glenn has softened towards her, and besides, the people of Winterfell took her side so quickly she did not expect this. A voice from one of the servants can be heard from behind the door. The maid asks the mistress if she should heat some water for her bath, and the young lady tells her to do so, and then asks Rhys if she would like to come in for a minute, after which the girl hands the maid the jewelry. The girl asks the mistress what it is, and the main character says that the Reyna region, located in the Balong Fortress, is known not only for the production of iron ore, but also for glass. The young lady claims that she brought this thinking about the maids. She says to give the jewelry to Yuri and Aiden too. The maid asks how things can be so valuable to them, and Nadia claims that they are so valuable because they are not jewelry, but simply glass products. The brown-haired lady says they were very helpful when she first arrived in Winterfell, so she wants to repay them. Now the main character realizes that she realized one thing after returning to the past. It's not worth trying to look good for people who hate you anyway, and it's much better to spend that time caring for your people and those around you. The maid thanks her mistress. Afterwards, she and the other maids chat while heading to the bathroom. One of them says he's never met such a mistress before. She's so kind and caring. Another maid says the butler says she's doing a very good job. However, the maid is a little worried about something. She asks what is wrong with the master, and whether he is not interested in their mistress at all. Balong Fortress out of longing for him. Another maid says this is true, because their mistress is so beautiful and has a good character. And where else can you find such a mistress? Another maid says that the young lady, although she doesn't show it, seems to be heavy-hearted, because the last time he refused to spend their wedding night with her, she cried so much. Then the girl with brown hair asks, what about this idea? The main character is in the bathroom at this time, and when she plunges into the warm water, she realizes that she was wondering why it took longer to prepare the bath today. It turns out they paid more attention because she'd been gone for so long. The young lady relaxes and thinks her fatigue has vanished, but then someone else enters the bathroom. The young lady turns around and wonders if the maids have come to serve, but when she sees who it is, she is surprised. The one who entered turns out to be the Marquis. The girl, shocked, asks Glenn if it's him, wondering what on earth it is. The guy claims that he also doesn't know how this happened, but he was told to use this bathroom because his needs repairs. The young lady seems to understand what happened. She remembers how the maid told the mistress to trust her, but she simply thought that the maid was simply taking a responsible approach to her work. The girl thinks she's never seen Glenn so embarrassed. She says it seems the servants were playing a joke on them. The girl asks if he will come into the room and wait a little, because she will soon finish and leave, and the Marquis asserts that he will make sure that the guilty are punished. The young lady says that there is no need to do this, because they did it out of bad intentions, and were just thinking about her. Then the guy says that he will go, and the main character turns around and sighs. The young man suddenly stops and wonders if he really looked so insensitive that they had to resort to this, and then he turns around. And then he sits in the bathtub next to his wife. The main character is completely shocked by this, and the guy is only slightly embarrassed. The young lady asks if he has decided not to leave, but he only says that if he leaves now, rumors will spread that he has rejected her again, and she will find herself in a difficult situation. The young lady wonders if he is thinking about her now. Then she smiles and tells him to stay a while and then come out. The main character thinks that there's nothing wrong with that, and he's so sweet when he tries. The girl says that since this is how it turned out, Maybe they can help each other wash like real spouses. The guy turns around a little embarrassed and says that it's not that he doesn't want it. The main character simply notices his scar and asks when it appeared, and then reaches out her hand. The marquise tells her to wait, and the young lady apologizes and asks if she was too close. But he only becomes even more embarrassed and asks why she doesn't keep her distance at all in such a situation. The young woman says she was just worried because it seemed like the guy was in a lot of pain. The young man thinks it would have been better if he had just left. After all, he can't help but look at her, so Nadia suggests they just talk. She says that so much has happened in that time, and the marquise says that, if you think about it, he never thanked her officially. But thanks to her, the lands of Winterfell became much richer, because these lands were always limited in resources and did not have enough food and minerals. But now there is, and a powerful army at that. The guy says he's sincerely grateful to her. The main character just smiles and says it's okay. She realizes that for the first time, someone has acknowledged her, and it makes her feel so happy. She also thanks Glenn, and he asks why. The girl then replies that it's because he married her. This makes the guy even more embarrassed. The next day, they're both eating at the table. The maids are whispering. One of them says that it seems like they had a great time together yesterday, and the second says that they were in the bathroom until dawn. The main character is happy because she got enough sleep and took a bath, and now she is eating with a smile on her face. But for some reason, the marquise could not fall asleep after eating. He gets up from the table and says that today is the day to inspect the territory. One of the maids tells the master that he and the mistress can go and inspect the grounds. Glenn just remains silent, and the girl adds that he hasn't been there for a long time. And besides, a huge market opened there today, and there is something to see. The young lady is a little puzzled by this. She thanks Risa for her concern, but claims that she also needs to deal with the things she has been putting off today. The marquise merely extends his hand to her and invites her to go together, after which they find themselves at the market. Nadia says she heard there were a lot of people there, but she didn't think there were that many. The boy says the Rhinelands have joined Winterfell, but suddenly, a passing man nudges the young lady, and others, seeing her, ask if this is not the lady. The second villager says that she just looks like her, because the lady would not wear such cheap clothes. The woman asks if he thinks so, and there is another person behind him. He looks at the main character with an empty yet furious gaze. Glenn says that since there are so many people there today, it could be dangerous, and it seems even the guards have already disappeared into the crowd, so he suggests they go home and then back again. But suddenly, that same man runs towards them. He screams that this is the offspring of Balazit. And it's all because of her. But suddenly, the marquis stands in front of his wife to protect her. And then he immediately puts the guy on the ground, and with a cold look, he asks who the hell he is. The guy lying on the ground tells the master that she is the daughter of Balazit, the worst enemy of the north, so he should not let himself be fooled. After all, it was because of her damn family that his brother died. The villager screams that they don't know how to fight properly, and then they put their soldiers on the front lines. The main character is horrified by this. One of the villagers asks what's going on, and two women whisper that it seems his brother died because of the Balazit family. One of them says that it is of course true that they have bad relations with the south, but is it the lady's fault after all? The girl sacrificed so much for Winterfell. But suddenly, a woman from the crowd screams. She immediately falls to her knees and asks the gentleman for forgiveness. The woman says her son made a huge mistake. She claims he was always a sickly child and stayed at home. And after the death of his only brother, on whom he could rely, he still cannot come to his senses, so she asks the master to spare him. The woman claims her first son, Henry Clark, died on the Kalia expedition. It's not the lady's fault. She claims she knows there's a severe penalty for desecrating the lady's honor. But in memory of her first son, she asks him not to do this. Glenn is silent for a moment, and then lets the boy go. He says that he remembers Henry Clark. The woman does not understand what he is talking about, and the marquise continues his speech. He claims the boy was the one who fought bravely on the front lines for Winterfell. He also says that the young man died as a hero. Then the guy cannot hold back his tears, and his mother too. At this time, the main character approaches the marquise and says that everything is fine with her, so she asks me to make a problem out of it. She says that the truth is completely fine, and the marquise turns around and says that since his wife says that it is fine, he will let it go. He bends down to the woman and puts his hand on her shoulder, and then claims that it must have been hard for her. The woman, with tears in her eyes, thanks the mistress, and then leaves with her son. The young lady thinks she's momentarily forgotten how strong the people's hatred for Balazit is, and this is understandable. because her father has done a lot of things, and solving just a couple of their problems will not improve the situation much. That same evening, the protagonist is sitting over papers, but then a servant approaches her and says it's very late and time to rest. The young lady asks if that much time has passed already. Then she says she's fine and will work some more, and they can go. But Anil says they should anyway. However, the main character interrupts him and says she doesn't want to sleep yet, but promises she won't be staying up too long, so they shouldn't worry. The servants exchange glances, then ask to be excused and leave. On the way, one of them says that he is truly grateful that the lady is trying so hard for the residents, but isn't she overdoing it? Well, another says that she looks like someone who needs something to immerse herself in. Glenn, meanwhile, is practicing with a sword, decapitating one of the dummies. Then he glares at it. The Marquis remembers that guy at the market and realizes the server's losses were enormous, since Balazith had put their people on the front lines during the expedition, and that wasn't all. He swings his sword at the mannequin again, and he thinks that the Duke is also his parents' enemy, and Nadia is his daughter. But all this evil was done by her father, not her, because Nadia helps them, and if it weren't for her help, Winterfell would not have been able to prosper so much, and the girl is not their enemy. Anna, on the contrary, is a blessing. However, the fact that she was a member of the Balazit family had not disappeared, and she must have also enjoyed how I saved his parents and walked all over innocent people. But then he throws away his sword and puts his hand to his head. Then the knights come to the training ground and say that the master is early today. One of them claims that recently he has been constantly the mistress, and he was not seen there, but his face has become so handsome, and is it really because he is a newlywed? But then the boy with bags under his eyes turns to them, and the knight says he takes back his words. He asks where the lady is, and if everything is all right, then the knights gather in a semicircle and begin gossiping. One of them says that the guy was really so gloomy when they mentioned the lady earlier, and the second says that their master is such a blockhead in these matters. Then the third asks if he still hasn't accepted the lady's feelings. The young man looks away, and the knights insist that everything seems to be so. One of them turns to the gentleman and says that no matter how passionate love is, feelings eventually cool down. And if he continues like this, he'll regret it later. The green-haired knight asks if he thinks anyone will ever love him so sincerely, since his mistress's feelings are genuine. The red-haired knight asks where else in the world there are girls like the mistress, and that the Marquis is her type is his greatest blessing. The Marquis replies that he knows that himself. He says Nadia is too good for him. The knights agree, saying that's true, because she's smart, beautiful, and, most importantly, she truly loves her husband. Then the knight asks his master what the problem is, wondering if he falls in love with her, what will happen to his mother and bedridden father. The boy has no intention of blaming Nadia for her father's crimes. But to love the daughter of the one who destroyed your mother is another matter, so he cannot accept her feelings. He thinks that they should not do this for some reason. Then Fabian runs up to the Marquis and says that the lady invites the gentleman to have lunch together. If he is not busy, he could come over. The Marquis is a little surprised by this proposal, but joins the meal. They dine in silence. The main character thinks that it seems like he is still thinking about it, about what happened then. She says that she understands that the residents do not trust her because they know why her father has a bad reputation, but if the Marquis is suddenly worried about her, he may not do this. But the guy just suggests not talking about it. The young lady thinks they can't just leave it like that, and she'd really like to defuse the situation. So she tells Glenn that they're married after all, and if something happens, wouldn't it be better to talk about it? She asks if he remembers how she said she'd choose him if it came down to him and his father. The girl also says she didn't just say that. Honestly, she's with her father, but the Marquis only cries out in satisfaction. The main character is shocked by this, and the young man realizes what he's done. He immediately puts his hand on his head and apologizes. He says he didn't mean to get angry. The main character just smiles and says it's okay. She understands he's worried, so when Glenn is ready to talk, he should let her know. She says a little sadly that she'll wait, but the guy thinks it's not because of her, and she's just the daughter of the man who killed his mother. But despite this, he likes her. The Marquis realizes it's his own fault. The young lady then heads down the corridor to her room, but Fabian catches up with her, shouting for the mistress to wait for him. The girl asks what's wrong. The knight says it seems the master has upset her, as he spent the entire day training and didn't even come into the office. The young lady only looks a little sad after this. The knight asks to listen and asks if the lady knows about the disaster that happened to his parents. The girl understands that he is talking about the carriage fall from the mountain ridge that killed the Marquis. Glenn's mother has died, and his father is still recovering from a serious injury. The knight says the young lady's father was to blame for this disaster. The protagonist says she understands. The girl knows this because her father clearly hated the Marquise and made no secret of it. The knight adds that the master suffers greatly because he fell in love with the daughter of the one who harmed his parents, and it seems that because of what happened in the village, his suffering has only increased. Fabian claims that he wants to say that this is in no way because of her, and nothing can be done in this situation, so he tells the lady not to blame herself. The girl just smiles and thanks the knight, and then goes to her room. The young lady thinks that it is not that she did not understand why the people of Winterfell considered her father their enemy, but still, it was not he who killed her mother and wounded Glenn's father. In her past life, the girl had heard this from him personally. The blonde man claimed that it seemed the Marquise had many enemies even within his own territory, although that happens to any family. The lady with brown hair asked if her father had anything to do with this tragedy, but he only asks if she thinks he would use such a cheap trick, and says that if he had had a hand in this, there would be no one left alive. Besides, if the Marquis dies, wouldn't his son Glenn take his place? He's far better than his father, and the Duke can't read his mind. If Glenn officially takes over Winterfell, they'll only become much stronger. So the blonde man asks why he needs help with this. The young lady realizes that she'd heard the Marquise's body was already stiff, and she doesn't think it's the result of the accident. After all, the people in the South wouldn't have acted without father's order, so they have nothing to do with it, and that means someone else is behind it, just as father said. And a traitor among his own people could easily have entered the Marquise's bedroom and been trusted implicitly. The main character understands that she must find the real criminal, because if a civil war begins in the future, she must gather all her strength and cannot turn a blind eye to the problems within the state. But she doesn't understand how, because despite everything she's done for them, she still can't convince the people. But suddenly, someone calls for the mistress. It turns out to be a maid. She says that she has just brought a letter from the Duchy of Balazit. The girl looks at the letter, which says that it is intended for his beloved daughter, and writes in her heart that after her departure, the house was completely empty, and maybe she will write to him more often, as they agreed before her departure. The young lady understands that it looks like an ordinary letter, but by writing letters, he clearly means conveying information, and any reasonable person will be able to immediately understand this hidden meaning. The young lady thinks that if anyone sees this, they might assume she's in cahoots with her father, so she wonders how he could send such a letter so easily. He must be warning her, so she can send him information about Winterfell's weakness. The maid asks if the mistress wants to write a reply and prepare the paper for her, but the young lady says no, and she wants to think about the answer. Nadia realizes she can't leave things as they are. Meanwhile, the Marquise's aunt is surprised. She asks if Glenn really stopped going to that girl. One of the servants says he's gifted, and he heard that the master has been preoccupied with work lately, and there's constant talk about their relationship cooling. It seems that the fact that one of the local residents attacked the lady with the words that she was a spy became a problem. And they say that this man's brother was a valuable soldier to the master. The woman only smiles, hearing this. She says that means there's a chance, even though the Marquis seems to be in love with this girl. Grace thinks that doubts usually start with something insignificant, and if they grow around his mother's death, it will be much easier to shake him. The servant claims the Marquis is overreacting, first entrusting the household to his mistress, and now, as soon as she appears, she runs away, and this can't go on. The young man claims he can no longer stand by and watch the Winterfell family fall into Balasith's hands. The woman tells him not to worry and to leave it all to her, after which she gets up from the couch and sit down at the table with a piece of paper. Auntie thinks that no matter how outstanding this girl is, she won't last there even a year, after which she writes a letter, and you think that the young lady is who knows who in this family is her people. She then hands the black-haired boy a paper and tells him to pass it on with a smirk. She also tells him not to forget to tell them to burn the letter as soon as they read it. Glenn is practicing again from early morning. This time it's archery, and he hits the target with one precise shot. The main character watches him from behind and thinks that this awkwardness between them needs to be sorted out for the sake of the future. She is worried that he has become afraid of her again. So the girl approaches her husband and asks if he can teach her too, and the guy asks what. Then she looks at the bow in her hand and wonders if she really wants to learn how to shoot it. Nadia asks if she can, but he just turns around without saying a word. The young lady understands that, as she thought, he is again uncomfortable with her, but he only says that newcomers take advantage of this. And she takes a simple bow out of the box. The main character smiles in response and takes the bow in her hands. The guy tells her to knock an arrow and pull the bowstring. Nadia, her hands shaking, asks if she's doing it right. Well, the guy just comes up to her and corrects her stance. He says that it's better to put her legs wider, and the girl had better stand straight and not bend her body, after which he tells her to pull the bowstring to the limit and helps her with this. The young lady is embarrassed by this, but when she shoots the arrow, it simply falls. The young man says it will take some effort to get used to it, and if she's willing, he'll set aside time to practice. The main character then thanks him. The guy talks about what happened last time. Nadia asks if he's still worried about it, because she's really okay. But then he, blushing a little, thanks her for today. The main character, with a sincere smile on her face, says that you're welcome. A little while later, one of the maids heads into the garden, looking around to make sure no one follows her. And then in the bushes, she finds her basket with sewing material. She thinks it's also good that no one found it. Afterwards, the girl begins to embroider, thinking how dark it is. But suddenly, someone cries out who she is. It turns out to be one of the knights, asking what Idy is doing so late at night. The girl asks why he's there at such an hour. The guy claims the lady asked him to heat the room, so he's looking for firewood. But suddenly, he notices that the young lady's needles and threads are falling out from behind, so he asks if she is secretly working. The guy asks if close servants are allowed to do part-time jobs, since they are paid twice as much for caring for just one person. He immediately grabs the maid by the arm and yells at her to come with him, as everyone must know what she's doing. He claims her mistress should be asleep by now, but Mistress Grace is still in the main house. The girl asks Jacob to wait and not do this, because when she gets the money, she'll split it with him. But the knight only exclaims, asking if she wants him to get into trouble for this, and then tells her to stop talking nonsense and go. After which, he throws her into Mistress Grace's room. The woman asks what all the noise is about late at night, and the boy says that this maid serves the mistress, but she secretly does sewing as a supplementary income. Instead of caring for her mistress at night, she was busy with other matters. Jacob says that the mistress must throw her out of the mansion. The young lady, hearing this, is horrified. She says, "Mistress," that she didn't betray her mistress, and that's all. But the woman just looks at her and asks what she's talking about. And the blonde continues and says that she needs money. Their salary is not enough for expensive medicines for a loved one. The woman just tisks and asks what kind of medicine is so expensive, and the girl says that, together with it, it costs about 1 gold coin. Grace just leans over to the girl and asks if the marquise could take care of her own, out loud. And then he hands the girl a bag of money. She says that this should be enough to pay for the medicine. The next day, the young lady greets Mistress Grace with a smile. The woman says she hasn't seen the marquise for a long time. She also claims that lunch is just over, and she's already at work. The young lady says it's her personal business, and she writes a letter back to her father. The woman says she might have disturbed her, but the main character says no, and it's not that urgent, so she invites her aunt to sit down. Well, the girl thinks, what happened? Because that woman is not the kind of person who can come to her first. Grace simply sits down and claims she came today to apologize. The young lady doesn't understand why she decided to do this so suddenly, and the woman says that, frankly, she thought that the girl was a spy pursuing her own goal, but she took such selfless care of Winterfell, and she heard the knight's conversations and realized that she was wrong. Grace says that she is very sorry for not recognizing the young lady's sincerity and for being so rude, and then asks if the girl will accept her apology. The main character immediately replies that, of course, she will do it, and the woman is a little shocked because she did not expect such a reaction. Nadia just smiles and says how glad she is that she brought it up. After all, she's as much an aunt to her as she is to Glenn, and from now on, she can feel comfortable. The woman says that she is very grateful to her for her kindness and asks if she has already seen Glenn's father, because it seems that he does not have much time left, so let the young lady go and say hello before he passes away. The young lady understands that when they first married the Marquise, there were always guards standing outside his father's room, who did not allow anyone to enter, but then everyone considered her a spy and was afraid that she could harm him. And now the main character agrees and says she'll do just that. The woman says that's great and is worried she's taken up too much of the young lady's time, so she rises from her seat and says she'll probably be going. The protagonist then asks her not to say that, as the girl was glad to see her, after which, the young lady orders Adi to escort her mistress. The maid obeys, and after that, the young lady is left alone. She immediately looks at her with a cold gaze. A little while later, the girl, standing by the window, thinks about the woman's words, but she said to visit the Marquise, And there must be a reason for this sudden attitude. The maid approaches her mistress and asks if she would like more tea. The protagonist declines, and the maid apologizes to the mistress and asks if she really will go to visit the marquis. Nadia says not now, but she needs to go. She claims she's been meaning to for a while, but hasn't had the chance. The young lady thinks she should take this chance and find out who's trying to harm him. The maid tells her mistress that she knows it's none of her business, but the young lady should be careful. The girl claims she's talking about Lady Grace, and that their relationship has changed so suddenly, which is why she's very worried. The maid excitedly says that she is in no way slandering her, and she knows how much the woman tries for the sake of her family, but the maid is only worried about Nadia. The main character smiles and says that she will be careful, and then thanks Risa for her concern. But after that, when the young lady looks out the window, she notices something strange. She sees her maid and Grace there, the two of them talking, and the young lady wonders why they are there. Risa says that Idy is a maid close to the lady, but the lady and Grace no longer manage the house, so she wonders why these two should be together. The main character thinks this is strange and becomes wary. That same day, she decides to visit the head of Winterfell. The girl comes there with the butler and looks at the lying man, and Gordon claims that it is Isaac Winterfell. Nadia will think the man's face has become haggard. The butler approaches the prostrate gentleman. He claims that the younger owner has married them and asks Togo to look and see for himself how beautiful the new marquise is. Gordon asks if the gentleman hadn't said he'd always dreamed of holding grandchildren. He insists the new marchioness is beautiful and intelligent, and the union of these two wonderful people will produce many beautiful children. The butler holds his hand and asks him to open his eyes, and then turns to Nadia, and he tells her to bow to the honorable marquise. The young lady thinks Glenn must be there every time he comes, and every time she wonders how much pain he's in. The main character bows and greets Sir Isaac of Winterfell. She claims that her name is Nadia, and she is the eldest daughter of the Duke of Balasith. She recently married and became a member of the Winterfell family. And even though she has little experience, she will do everything possible to avoid tarnishing Winterfell's reputation. Yunoi lady is so sorry for tricking Glenn into marrying her, but nevertheless, her words are sincere, and she truly will only leave when she's made Winterfell a better place. After that, they leave the room, and the butler locks it. The protagonist realizes that the room is very well guarded, and even the windows are locked. Now the young lady sees that everyone is attentive, and no one can just enter or leave. Therefore, the girl thinks that, as expected, one of her own is behind the death of the Marquis. But suddenly, Glenn comes up behind them. He asks Nadia why she's there. The main character only replies that she has risen a little, but wanted to visit the Marquise because she is now a member of the House of Winterfell. And then she turns to her husband and asks if they can now go to the Marquise together. When the young lady saw him in such a state, it was clear he was very lonely. The boy, hearing this, only agreed. Then Nadia says goodbye to the young man and says that they will see each other again, and then wishes him a good visit to his father. But suddenly, the main character remembers something else and turns around, addressing Glenn. And then she goes up to the guy and asks if he will give her a minute after he visits his father. A short time later, the main character is sitting in bed with a stack of papers. Risa says that it's time for bed, mistress, as it's already midnight. The young lady asks if time has flown by so quickly. The other maid merely says that she's heard that other families don't stay that long and that their mistress works harder than anyone else. Adi says that the Marquise is also good and asks when he will finally admit that he has the most hardworking and kind, good, virtuous wife. The maid asks the young lady if she thinks it would be better to use a love potion, after which she approaches the mistress. He asks if she knows the legend of the 1,000-year-old tree. The young lady says she's never heard of it before. The maid adds that near the northern gate of the castle, there grows a large tree, and it is 1,000 years old. They say that it existed even before the construction of the castle. Therefore, the tree is magical and filled with spirits. She will answer that in the spring, only one day and only at night. There is a legend that if you pray to this tree for love, then you can make anyone fall in love with you. One of the maids exclaims that it's true, and the tree has brought more than one couple together. Others say that perhaps their mistress will make a wish as a joke, and they'll see if it comes true. Then the young lady says that this is just a legend, and it turns out that they just want to look at the tree. The maids say they've only heard that it's very beautiful and only blooms once, but if they go out at night, the ugly maid will scold them, so they ask their mistress to come with them. The young lady agrees and asks when it blooms, and the maids say in 3 days and thank their mistress. The next morning, Risa is sleeping peacefully in her crib. but suddenly she wakes up to some sounds. It turns out to be 80. The maid asks why her colleague is so early, and the girl replies that she just woke up early. The maid thinks this is a bit odd and wonders how long the girl actually sleeps. Risa asks if 80 is going somewhere and if she needs to get ready, and the blonde replies that she just thought that she should go to the cafeteria to be there first. But then a bag of gold coins suddenly falls out of her dresser. Risa is shocked and asks if they are gold. And then he asks where 80 got so much money, but the blonde just turns around and says that she'll go. Risa is a little alarmed by her friend's behavior. Afterward, she gets dressed and goes into the dining room, where the maids are already eating. The girl wonders if 80 is there, but they agreed to go to the cafeteria. Then the young lady approaches her colleague and says that she is responsible for the food today, and then asks if 80 has eaten yet, but the maid says that it turns out she hasn't seen her today. Then Risa asks Hazel if she saw 80 in the dining room and claims that she is one of the lady's close associates, but the girl replies that she did not see her, then wonders when she could have disappeared this morning, considering her rather secretive behavior and where the money suddenly appeared. Therefore, the young lady thinks something is clearly up lately. A little while later, the mistress and 3 maids head to that very tree. One of them says they're lucky today, like a cloud, because flowers are sure to bloom on a day like this, and another maid claims she's heard the flowers on the 1,000-year-old tree are very beautiful. Then Risa asks if they know that the spirit of the goddess of love's daughter resides within the tree, so she decides all love affairs. She suggests the mistress pray for her well-being, and another maid says that if everyone prays together, the wish will come true faster. The main character smiles and says that, of course, she is grateful, but aren't they too much of a burden on the spirit? After which, 80 points to the tree and tells the lady to look there, because it is very beautiful. The young lady, looking in that direction, is surprised, and the maid asks if it is really beautiful. The main character just looks at the tree with pink petals, and Risa says that if the lady makes a wish, the Marquis will definitely change his mind. Nadia thinks that it is really beautiful, and it would be great if Glenn could see it. But then the young lady doesn't understand why she suddenly thought of him. The maid says that the mistress should close her eyes. After which, Rhys turns to the spirit of the tree and asks Togo to make the Marquis fall in love with their mistress and let the two live happily ever after in Winterfell. The young lady thinks she is very grateful to her maid, but she and Glenn are not destined to be together, and one day she will have to leave Winterfell. But the girl folds her hands and makes a wish that Glenn will still find his love. After all, one day on this earth, Glenn will find happiness with a girl who will become the mistress of Winterfell. The young lady asks that one day he will definitely find someone who will truly love him, and maybe Glenn can make her happy. Hello, even though he seems cold, but in fact he is a very kind person. The young lady clenches her fist and wonders why she has such strange feelings then. One of the maids turns to the Marchioness and says that the lady's wish will definitely come true because the Marquis of Winterfell and the lady are famous for their wonderful relationship, although their marriage was one of convenience, but the tree will probably give its blessing. Risa asks the lady if they can stay there a little longer because she doesn't know when the next time she will have the opportunity to see this tree will be. Nadia smiles and tells her to look after her health. She wonders if it's really fun to run away like this at night, after which, the girl thinks it's already gotten chilly. One of the maids turns to her and asks if it's cold at night, as her mistress is shivering. Nadia replies that it's only a little. Then, 80 tells the girls that she needs to bring the mistress back, and that they should stay there for now, and if she sees them, then let them say that they were together and she left first. The girls then thank their colleague. Afterwards, the blonde leaves with her mistress. Risa, however, thinks that to get there faster, it's better to go from the north rather than the south. The girl wonders if there is a road she doesn't know about, while the main character walks with 80. She says that it is cold in the north, even at this time of year, although in the capital, it is warm even at night. The blonde says she didn't even notice, and apparently got used to the northern weather. The wife asks if she'll ever get used to it, and the maid replies that of course she will be able to see the girl there for a long time, so she will definitely get used to it. But suddenly, someone shouts at them to stay put. It turns out to be knights, and the young lady asks who they are. The blonde man claims his name is Tristan, and that he is the captain of the inner guard. He asks the lady to excuse him, but then asks where she is headed. The young lady claims to be going into the room, and then asks what happened, but suddenly Aunt comes out. She screams that this is a blatant lie, and asks if the girl thought that she would not understand that she was trying to sneak out of the castle. The main character says that she doesn't understand what she's talking about and why there's a need to run at such a time. But the woman just screams how ashamed she is, and does the young lady think she can get away with it? Grace then unfolds the bundle of paper and says that this is the letter that the girl sent to Duke Balazith. The young lady then asks what is wrong with it, because if she had read it, she could have understood that it was an ordinary letter to her father. The woman only says that Nadia is an impudent girl and asks how she can be so shameless, after which she orders one of the servants to bring her a candle, and he brings a roll of paper to the fire, after which a secret inscription appears on it, stating that the girl has fulfilled her duty and will leave at noon. The woman says that if you pour lemon juice on the inscription, it will disappear completely, but if you hold the piece of paper to a flame, it will appear. So Grace asks if the girl thought she didn't know about it. The woman cries out that if she had willingly hesitated a little, she would not have noticed, and then the girl would have already managed to go to her father. The young lady claims that she never wrote anything like that, and that someone is clearly trying to set her up, because if she was planning to return to the capital, then why did she get married? But Grace just turns around and turns to the doctor, screaming for him to explain. The man is a little scared, and the main character thinks that everyone, including Glenn and Giscard, have gathered there. The doctor will say that for some unknown reason, the Marquis suddenly had a fever in the morning, and now his body is simply boiling, and if this continues, his life is in danger, and everyone is shocked by this news. The main character asks if the woman wants to say she tried to harm the Marquis, and Grace only claims that she herself knows about her sins, because after the girl came to Isaac, supposedly to visit, he became ill. She screams that this must not be the first time the girl has acted like this, and this letter is proof of that. After which, the aunt tells Glenn to look at this shameless woman, because she tried to harm his own father, so the girl should be immediately seized and interrogated. Glenn just looks at her with a frown, and Giscard tells the lady to calm down first of all, because she is seriously worried. The woman asks what it means to calm down. You ask if he calls you the Marquis's friend, because how can she calm down when her family is being harmed? The Lord simply says that it hasn't been proven yet. The woman asks what he's talking about, wondering why the guy is back on that girl's side, when he's always willing to sacrifice himself for Isaac. Giscard says that it is worth starting with the fact that the lady has no reason to harm the Marquis, because Glenn leads Winterfell, and he personally would not want his daughter to see benefit in taking the Marquis's life. The woman simply hands over the letter and asks the Lord what this letter is about and why the illness worsened after this girl visited her brother, and now she tried to leave the palace at midnight, as written in the letter. The young lady claims that she just wanted to see the 1,000-year-old tree in bloom, and that's all. But the woman just turns around and asks if she's going to make a fool of herself any longer, because why did she try to take the shortcut instead of the northern gate, which leads straight to her chambers? She cries out to Glenn, isn't he embarrassed by all this, and the Duchess of Balazit, the woman who killed his mother? And now she's trying to kill his father. The guy just looks at her furiously, and the woman thinks that this expression is very frightening. But what's even more terrifying is that the person he was trying to give his heart to tried to destroy his family. Grace thinks that even if Giscard is on her side, she won't be able to turn against Glenn. The guy simply approaches Nadia and says he wants to hear her side of the story. She agrees. She asks if the lady is saying the letter states she intends to harm the Marquis and return to the capital. The woman says that's exactly it, and the evidence is clear, so the girls better not pretend. Well, the young ladies say it's very strange, because she wrote this letter in Glenn's presence. Grace is shocked by this. The young lady turns to Glenn and says he was there when she wrote the letter and asks if he saw her write something secret in fruit juice. Grace wonders what she's even talking about. She screams that this is complete nonsense, and the girl is only adding fuel to the fire. The young lady tells Glenn to answer, after which the guy claims that his wife is right, and she wrote this letter in his presence. So it turns out that someone forged the letter in order to slander his wife. The woman is shocked by this. She wonders why he still listened quietly, and also why Adie told her about Glenn. The guy just asks why his aunt did this, but she just screams in shock, asking what he was even talking about. Does Glenn really think she's trying to frame the girl? She screams that it's someone's plot, and she doesn't know what it is either, but the guy just approaches her and says she forged the letter herself and somehow worsened his father's condition. And then she caused all this commotion in the middle of the night, and now claims she's innocent. The guy claims that if he had accused his wife now, the truth would never have come out. He asks if this is what the woman wanted, and if Mrs. Grace is to blame for the accident with the carriage. The woman simply screams that this is all nonsense, and Isaac is her brother, and she would never harm her family. But the guy only claims that if the woman was really so worried about him, she would have looked for the real culprit. They tried to harm his father in order to blame Nadia. After which he orders Mistress Grace's arrest. She only desperately cries out for Glenn to listen to her, because she really is innocent. The woman wonders how this happened and when. She thinks that if this stupid maid had done her job properly, then everything would not have turned out like this, and since the guy is looking for the culprit, who else does she have a chance? That's why the woman points to 80 and screams that this maid is to blame for everything because she brought her that letter. Grace thinks that the girl was with her, and I can't avoid the investigation, because when the interrogation begins, they will definitely believe her more, because she is a member of the family, and so she can pin everything on the maid. But the main character is only defending her servant, saying her mistress wasn't satisfied with her and is now looking for a victim. The girl says she thinks she should say this. But the woman doesn't have any sick siblings. What does this mean? Didn't the girl take a second job to pay for her sick brother's medication? If she has no other reason, why risk it? She recalls how one servant claimed to have been hauling firewood for his mistress and happened to see the maid. Grace wonders if the story about Jacob passing by and noticing the wayward maid is a complete lie. The woman realizes that this foolish girl planned everything. The young lady, after all, had approached the Marquis a short time ago. He asked if the Southerners weren't to blame for his mother's death, then who was? The main character pointed out that Glenn had claimed he'd almost gotten into the carriage too, and the boy agreed. And the girl says that if that's the case, he could also have been in an accident. And of course, this is just an assumption for now. But if that had happened, it would have benefited only one person. Glenn realized it all in shock. He says that it would be beneficial for his aunt, but how can that be, since she is his father's blood relative? The main character says that she also hopes that it is not her, and that this is just an assumption. Then the girl asks why they don't check, because there is some way to prove it. After this, after consulting with Glenn, she chose the most suitable person, one in whom she had deep trust. Nadia told 80 that she played a key role in this matter, and the maid obeyed her mistress. The main character says that she truly doubted the mistress's guilt, but fortunately, or unfortunately, she was caught. The young lady had no idea this would happen. Grace is now in complete shock, and Glenn approaches her and says that the lady will be presented in the court of Winterfell on charges of harming the Marquis. He tells her with a furious look that she shouldn't even dare count on protection, because she'll definitely be kicked out of Winterfell. The woman can't believe what's happening and just screams. Glenn then covers his face with his hand. The main character asks if he's okay. The guy claims that he didn't want to believe it until the very end, because besides him and his aunt, his father had no one at all, and if not him, who else would take care of his father? The boy wonders how a woman dares kill his mother and live in his castle like a rat. Nadia worries about Glenn. He says that he owes her again, but the young lady just tells him not to think about it, since it concerns her. Giscard approaches them. He claims he'll take charge of the lady's interrogation, and the Marquis needn't worry, as they'll conduct a thorough investigation to ensure no one escapes punishment. Glenn says he trusts him. The Lord then thanks the lady for her assistance and asks if he should escort her. The Marquis says it's a good idea, and then he extends his hand to his wife. The main character was completely surprised, but she takes his hand and heads toward her chambers. After they arrive at Nadia's room, the young lady thanks her husband for accompanying her, and then he declares that he will go. The girl understands that he may seem calm now, but inside he is still grieving. The young lady is already turning around, but then the Marquis grabs her hand and pulls her into a hug. Nadia is shocked, blushing slightly, and asks Glenn what happened, and he just continues to hug her. The guy thinks that today it became clear who was involved in his mother's death, and, although he should be sad, he is completely fine. It turns out the girl isn't the enemy's daughter, and his heart is at peace. The main character merely pushes Glenn away and asks if he's okay. The guy apologizes, and then says he needs to tell Nadia something. He thinks he can't help but admit it. But he can't imagine Winterfell without Nadia, so he wants to say something. But then he just looks away and says that they should talk about it now, and he will choose another day. The girl must be tired, so let her rest. The young lady bids him good night and enters the room, but once alone, she wonders what just happened. The next day, Glenn, sitting in his office, asks Guiscarda, did the woman want to make her son a lord? The man replies that, and after long hours of interrogation, it turned out that she went to great lengths to ensure that her son became a lord. It seems that she has a lot of people in the city center, and she put a lot of effort into planning the accident. The Marquis says Grace is so blinded by greed that she tried to kill her relatives. Then the Lord asks what they will do with her. And Glenn replies that the punishment must be proportionate to the crime. The Greenwood's property confiscated. Giscard says his master is right, but he merely adds that, of course, before that, they must first find out how the woman harmed her father. The guy asks if Grace confessed to it. Lord says he was just about to tell him, after which the man asks if the gentleman remembers the painting that hung in the Marquis's hospital room. Glenn asks if this is the painting Grace gave him, and if something was discovered on it. Giscard says it's true, and that giving a sick person a painting depicting the expulsion of an underworld god was so commonplace that no one suspected anything. But after examining the painting, the man noticed that the paint on it was highlighted like the Toxus plant. The young man begins to understand what's happening and asks what kind of plant it is. The Lord replies that when it blooms, it produces a bright color that can be used as a dye. When dried, the flower releases toxic substances, which is why this plant is banned. However, a similar color became lighter by mixing the resulting dye with another color. This plant has a less severe effect on healthy people. Glenn adds, saying that sick people like his father can be easily finished off. Giscard says it's all true, and if not for the master, the Marquis wouldn't have been saved. Then the boy asks what they're saying about his father's condition and whether he can still be cured. Lord insists there's no definitive answer, but his condition is stable now, and he thinks it's just a matter of waiting for now. Glenn said that when there are any changes, the Lord should definitely let him know. The main character is currently training with a bow, and she's clearly gotten better at it, as she's now hit the target. Fabian says that the lady is simply wonderful, and he heard that she is a beginner, but she did just great, and it seems that the gentleman's training helped her. The young lady doesn't understand what he's talking about, but then she remembers those same training sessions and blushes a little. But then she immediately pushes such thoughts away. The knight asks if everything is all right with the young lady, and the protagonist doesn't understand what he means. And Fabian claims that, thanks to her, they found out who tried to harm the Marquise, and now there is nothing more to worry about. So the young man asks how she's coping. The heroine simply asks the knights if they can finish early, believing she needs to go back now, and the young man agrees. After which the young lady leaves the training ground. She remembers the Marquise's words and thinks about what he was trying to say then. It may sound funny, but what if he wanted to confess his feelings to her, even though they were in a different relationship now? But the young lady wonders if she'll be able to leave Winterfell then. Meanwhile, someone reports that the team investigating Rio's dragon lair is returning. The main character says that they have finally returned, and the atmosphere has not been very good lately, so it is good that they came. The gray-haired man says it's true, because there's a lot of stuff there. He claims he's never seen so much gold and treasure, so he thinks they should be sold slowly to keep the price up. The main character agrees and says they'll leave the matter to him. The man says they seem to have found a lot of relics and documents. Therefore, if they are put up for auction, there will be buyers for them. Arthur says that, thanks to them, Winterfell will be able to accumulate a good amount of money, no less than the Southerners. But suddenly, one of the knights shouts for the master to look, and then runs towards him with an egg. Glenn is a little shocked by this. The knight says that this is the egg that he found, and Fabian asks if it is a dragon's egg. And then he excitedly cries out that it's amazing, and asks if a little dragon will hatch from it. The Marquis claims that perhaps the dragon there is no longer alive, since after the death of its owner, it was forgotten. The other knight said he thought so too, but it was still a shame to leave him there, so he asked what they should do. Glenn ponders for a moment, unsure what to do with this egg, as he can't break the shell to check if the baby is alive. He also can't simply sell a valuable item that's apparently a dragon egg. But then an idea occurs to him, so the guy turns to the main character. He asks if he can trust her with this egg, because the girl found Rio, so it is on her. The young lady asks if this is true, and if I can trust her with such a valuable thing. The Marquis says that, of course, the likelihood of it hatching is extremely low, considering how much time has passed since the dragon's death, but it will be a unique decoration. The young lady accepts the egg and thanks her husband. Afterwards, the dragon egg is placed in the study. The maids immediately looked at it with interest. One of them claimed she never would have thought she'd see anything like it in person. And Risa says, "What if the baby actually hatches? Then they'll have to raise the little dragon." The blonde says, "How cute he'll be." And another maid asks if it will be possible to tame him, because then the mistress will become a dragon rider or a tamer. The main character approaches them and says that there is no point in waiting for this, because a lot of time has passed since the death of the adult dragon, and even if it were a real dragon egg, it would not have survived until now. One of the maids says that the mistress still hopes for hatching, because they see that the young lady would also like this. The main character just smiles, thinking this is the first gift Glenn has ever given her, so she'll cherish it. Suddenly, Gordon knocks on the door. The Marquise turns around and asks what happened, and the butler says that a message has just arrived from the capital. He claims that Lord Li Jiho killed the poisonous dragon Gadabaru in the south of the country. Glenn asks what he's talking about. The protagonist realizes that Gordon seems to be talking about something that happened in the past. Although Li Jiho gained some fame for his expedition to Kalai, true glory came to him only after he slew the poisonous dragon Gadabiru. In addition, he became a hero in the war against demons, but the main character wonders what will happen in the future. The butler adds that the capital is now buzzing with news, because if in the north there is a war hero, the Marquise, in the south is the dragon hunter, Lord Li Jiho, and Gordon fears that this will lead to increased influence in the south. The Marquise claims that whatever they will do what they must, because to each his own. At this time, Duke Balazit enters the hall. He asks if this young man is behind the death of Gadabira. The blonde claims that he is greatly honored that the Dragon Slayer himself has come to them. Li Jiho tells him to stop joking like that because the Duke is flattering him, but the protagonist's father not only tells him to come back, after which the guy bows down and says that the 27 Reavers are returning to the Duke. The blonde says the boy did a great job. He thinks the dragon found in Valen Castle was the boy's weak point, but now that he's earned the honorable title of Dragon Hunter, the Duke knows he won't go down without a fight. After which the Duke says that Li Jiho is just in time, and he has someone to introduce the guy to, after which he calls Aiden to him and claims that he is his nephew. He graduated from the academy this year and returned to the capital. Aiden says he is very pleased to meet you, and then claims that Lord Jiho's fame has reached distant academies. The brunette says his name is Li Jiho, claiming he's not that great and simply enjoys the Duke's patronage. Li Jiho believes this nephew, who, according to Duke Balazit, has only a daughter, will inherit the title. The guy understands that if he is the next Duke, then it would be worth finding a common language with him. The nephew says that the guy looks exactly as they say about him, and it is not surprising that the Duke was thinking about marrying him to his cousin Nadia. The Lord merely smiles tensely and thanks him for such words. Then the Duke approaches them and says that it's time to stop chatting and go. The bloggers claim they've prepared the best booze in the South to treat him to. Then he approaches the Lord and says that, of course, they'll reward him with more than just drinks. He asks if the boy has anything he'd like to ask for. After all, they're celebrating his accomplishments today, so he can ask for whatever he wants. He can also petition the king for knighthood. His heart says such an opportunity doesn't come often, and he'll give him time to consider it, as the night will be long anyway. After which he leaves and tells Aiden to join him. The brunette is left alone. He thinks he's already been deprived of what he wants. Meanwhile, the main character sits and watches the dragon's egg. She thinks the egg's color has changed somehow, and maybe it's a matter of mood. At that moment, the Marquis enters the room. The young lady asks if he has arrived, and the guy claims that he did not want to disturb her, but the girl replies that everything is fine. Nadia recalls the events of that day and thinks that the relationship between them is somehow awkward, because this is the first time they have been alone since that day. The guy claims that he wanted to say something last time and is trying to say it now, but then screams are heard. After he opens the door, he asks what happened, and the maid, breathing heavily, reports that the older gentleman has woken up. Afterwards, they all go to Glenn's father. The elder gentleman asks if his son managed to marry Balazit's daughter while he was unconscious. Father asks if Glenn is saying that she foresaw the Black Doom, bought and sold medicine, devised a plan to take over Belong Castle, found the location of the Rio Dragon, created new forms of armor, developed new farming methods, and uncovered Grace's plot. The guy claims that everything is correct. Then the older gentleman asks if the guy is saying that the young lady did all this out of love for him. Glenn says yes, but his father insists that no matter how quickly the situation changes, it still won't be able to change their financial situation. Gordon says it was love at first sight, and that the gentleman really is very handsome. His father insists he looks like his mother, but there's no point in dwelling on that. Glenn sighs and says that in general, he wanted to say that Nadia is not a Balazite spy, and she is an ally of Winterfell, so there is no need to fear her. Isaac only asks if Glenn warns him in advance not to treat her badly, but the guy claims that this is not entirely true. After which, he silently looks at his wife. The young man thinks his father is partly right, but he didn't want to hurt Nadia's feelings, so he continued to justify it. The older gentleman just laughs. He says that if the girl were a spy, Glenn would quickly figure her out. Isaac says his son used to be a bore, But now he's suddenly become a caring husband, and it's true what they say about babies being born upside down. He says he thinks his son is very passionate. The main character agrees, and a little embarrassed, tells her father that the guy is always there. The man smiles, and the butler tells the Marquis that they thought he might be interested to know how the finances at Winterfell have changed over the years. So they prepared a book for this purpose. Gordon asks if the gentleman will look at it, and the man replies that he was just asking about it and that the butler is a fine fellow. Isaac leafs through the book and thinks that no matter how much Glenn says that the finances are fine, it is not enough to reassure him because there have been expeditions on this barren land, and rather unsuccessful ones at that. But then the man looks at the book in shock, after which he turns to the butler and asks if these are really their finances. He claims that something seems wrong there, because although the new lady has done a lot, there is something too much there. Gordon says he knows it's hard to believe, as he struggled to achieve it himself, but now their Winterfell is rivaled in wealth only by the South. The older gentleman is shocked by this. He turns to the young lady and thanks her, because the girl did a good job. Isaac says he was always worried about the financial issue, but now he is calm. The main character asks what her father is talking about, because it's not only her merit, because they all did it together. And of course, everything worked out, because Glenn trusted her. Father says they're handling everything so well that now they don't have to worry about dying. All that remains is to wait for the heir. The main character asks, a little puzzled, what he's talking about, and the man says that of course, by law, their family should have a successor, and they both look healthy, so he doesn't think it's worth worrying about. Then there is an awkward silence. The first to break it is the father. Isaac asks if he's wrong, and then he asks why they're silent. The main character wants to tell him something, but then decides it's better for her to remain silent. After all, no matter how close the girl was to Glenn, in the end, it would be she who would leave Winterfell, and if later a woman was found whom he truly loved. But then the young lady turns to her father and says that the Marquis said he doesn't intend to approach her. Isaac is shocked, and Glenn looks at his wife in shock. He remembers how he told her that he would never see a loved one in Balazit's daughter. The guy curses it and thinks that even though this situation was a misunderstanding, it's undeniable that he offended Nadia, but the guy thinks he did apologize. Then the father turns to Glenn and asks what the girl is talking about and whether he really told her that. The main character tells her father that it is not Glenn's fault because it was she who fell in love with the Marquis and forced him to marry her, and you cannot force a person to love someone he cannot. However, the girl thinks that it is obvious that the Marquis would like to see an heir because this is the most important thing in a noble family. There is only one way to avoid divorce and keep the family name intact. Then the main character asks, how about the Marquis taking a concubine? But the guy is clearly not thrilled with such a proposal. The father asks why Glenn needs another woman if she is there, because the girl herself would not want to raise someone else's heir. The main character says that, unfortunately, if the Marquis wants this, she will not resist. Isaac tells the young lady that he has had enough and asks Gordon to come out too, as he thinks he should talk to Glenn. After they are left alone, the father asks how this happened and why there was such a conversation at all, because it is obvious that the girl is dear to him, and as soon as the father opened his eyes, Glenn was hugging her. The guy replies that he couldn't do anything. At first, he thought that Nadia was a spy sent by Balazit and didn't think that she would take his words so close to heart. Isaac asks if his son has changed his mind. The Marquis replies that he has. And then the older gentleman tells him to go and correct this misunderstanding and apologize for any offense he's caused. The father asserts that he sees that the girl is a very good person. Then the boy agrees with his father and says that he will do so. The young lady, meanwhile, is already lying in her bed. She thinks sleep is not coming at all and wonders what to do. The girl recalls her words to the concubine, and she understands that on other days she would have gotten away with it. But now everything is different, and now Glenn completely trusts her, and if he really confesses his feelings to her and wants to be with her, the young lady would not be able to refuse. And besides, the older gentleman asked why Glenn needed another woman if there was Nadia. After all, she herself wouldn't want to raise someone else's heir. The main character imagines Glenn and another woman's child. The young lady understands that she does not even want to imagine such a thing, but she realizes that if she gets bogged down in this, all her plans will go to waste. Nadia understands that she must not forget the past, and if she remains in the house of Winterfell, then as before she will be drawn into politics, but the girl understands that she must not forget what her ultimate goal is. Suddenly, someone knocks on the door. It turns out to be the Marquis. He asks if he can come in. The main character immediately gets out of bed and says that of course she can. After that, the young man enters the room. He says that he would like to apologize because all his words about the girl being a spy for Duke Balazit were the result of his own rash judgment. So the young man asks for forgiveness. The protagonist, meanwhile, recalls her relatives and realizes that she has been wrongly accused or insulted more than once. But no one apologized, and the guy is completely different, so the main character says everything is fine. And the guy just approaches her and says what he said last time. He then approaches the young lady and places his hand on her cheek. The protagonist closes her eyes at this. The young man leans towards her, and their lips almost touch in a kiss. But then the main character pushes him away and tells him to wait. The guy is a little shocked by this. But the young lady thinks she promised, and that's not right. So Nadia decides she must confess that she married the guy only to escape her father's clutches. The young man asks if everything is okay, but the main character only looks at him seriously. She insists she has something to say too. Nadia understands that if the guy gets angry and says he'll divorce her right now, there's nothing she can do. The young lady needs to admit that she deceived him into marrying her and end it. Glenn asks what she wants to say. The main character thinks that if she explains how desperate she was, then he will be able to understand her. Then the young lady asks if Glenn will listen to her, and after that, the two of them go out into the garden. The guy claims that a lot of things are in bloom there. The young lady agrees with him and says that it's already summer in the north, so it's warmer. The Marquis looks at his wife and wonders if he's been hasty because he has to admit he doesn't know how to kiss either, but then he turns away, a little embarrassed. The main character says it seems like they just got married, but several months have already passed. The guy says that if you think about it, this is their first walk since the wedding, and he himself thinks that he was too indifferent to his wife because the girl went all the way to the north to find him, and now, when he tried to kiss her, Nadia pushed him away. Now the guy is thinking how pathetic he is, and the main character approaches him. The girl asks if Glenn trusts her. He claims there was a misunderstanding before, but now he certainly trusts her. The guy wonders why she's asking such questions. The young lady sadly says that she actually has something to confess and asks Glenn if he can. You listen to her, promising not to get angry. The guy is a little shocked at first, but then he gets down on one knee and says that he swears that the girl will not tell. He promises to believe her. The main character remembers all the moments they spent together. She thinks that if she tells the truth, Glenn will be disappointed in her. Although the young lady's feelings were not sincere, she truly enjoyed spending time with him. Nadia thinks that she has such a strange feeling and wonders why her heart is pounding so much. But then tears start to flow from her eyes, and the girl doesn't understand what it is. The Marquis approaches her. He wipes away her tears and says that the girl wants to say that she did not marry him for love. The young lady is just wondering how he found out, but the guy now understands what's going on. He says he has no doubt of her loyalty to Winterfell after what she did. The Marquis says that thanks to the girl, Winterfell is only blossoming, and he too. The guy claims that a lot has changed, but the more he thinks about it, the harder it is for him to believe that such a wise woman could fall in love with him, a stranger. But even if it was all a lie, Nadia is very important to him now, so he asks what truth she wants to tell. Then the young lady says that she actually hates her family and tells the whole story. The Marquise, in shock, asks if the Duke and her sister tried to kill Nadia. The main character says that there is, after all, and he wanted to use her as a pawn and then get rid of her. And if she had stayed with her father, he would have definitely finished her off. And in order to save herself, she had to flee from Balazit. And that was when the young lady met the Marquise, someone who hates Balazit as much as she does. A man of status and power, capable of standing up to Duke Balazit and avenging her. The main character says that because of Togo, she had to lie and she's sorry. Nadia says that if she continues to help develop Winterfell to resist Balasith, it will actually benefit the boy. And one day, when the Balazith family falls, she will quietly leave Winterfell. The Marquis is shocked by this. He asks what it means that she will leave, and the young lady says that she will definitely file for divorce. After all, the guy doesn't want to stay with a woman he doesn't love either. Nadia apologizes and says it's all her fault. Therefore, she suggests a divorce when everything is resolved and the guy finds a new wife. The young man suspected that his wife had secrets, but he didn't even think that everything was so serious. And now he understands what happened. The Marquis was so focused on his property that he didn't care about me. The girl found the best means to achieve her goal and built a sequence of her plans, after which she did not object to being called a woman blinded by love, but at the same time she desperately longed for revenge. The main character asks him if he's really angry, He thinks that if he thinks about it, there's nothing to be angry about. And the girl's hatred for Duke Balazit is nothing more than good luck for him. After all, the young lady had somehow rebuilt Winterfell, and the boy would never again meet someone as wise and capable as Nadia. The young lady would have her revenge, and the boy, in turn, would be rid of his sworn enemy, Balasith. But is this the rational approach when you get what you want? The young man thinks that's true, of course, but for some reason, the guy feels like his heart is cold. The main character just looks at him and asks if this surprised him very much, and if the Marquise is disappointed, but he replies that it is not like that at all. And he himself tries to think rationally, because he was simply embarrassed that the girl kept saying that she was in love with him, but what if she had not started helping Winterfell? But now the young lady is probably facing even more difficult challenges than before, so it is worth putting aside your emotions and thinking only about the interests of her part of her family. Glenn sighs heavily and says that you are certainly disappointed, but to think that there is nothing to be angry about. After all, Winterfell only thrives thanks to Nadia, and he wants to destroy House Balazith one way or another. And the girl had no other choice, so he will not blame her for lying about her feelings for him. The young lady says she didn't think he could understand her, and thanks Glenn. The guy says that now they can say that they have a profitable partnership and there is no longer a need to lie that she loves him. Then the main character smiles and says yes, but she thinks that, as the guy said, they now have a profitable partnership, so she shouldn't worry over nothing. But that same evening, the Marquis practices archery, and the guy thinks since when he can't take his eyes off a girl, even when she just smiles. He was surprised to hear that he was to have an heir from another woman. He puts his hand on his head, but a knight runs up to him and shouts that the gentleman has red liquid. The boy looks at his hands and realizes he pulled too hard on the corners. And then he turns around and says that everything is fine, so the knight shouldn't worry. The Marquis thought he was about to tell the girl to stay with him. He recalled the young lady talking about divorce and how it was all her fault. Fabian worries about his master, and the young man just puts his hand on his head and says that now everything is clear. After all, it's not Nadia who's in love with him, but he with her. The knight realizes that his master is acting strangely and wonders if something has happened between him and his mistress. But Risa also says that the lady has had neither appetite nor energy lately. But suddenly, one of the maids runs up to the Marquise, after which she says that the Marquise told him to come to the mistress's chambers. The guy is a little shocked by this, but agrees. The main character is sitting on her bed. She recalls the maid saying that the master would be there this evening and that the Marquis insisted on having an heir. Suddenly, someone knocks on the door and says they're coming in. It turns out to be Glenn. The main character asks if the Marquis sent him and then tells him not to worry because she understands. The girl turns around and tells the guy to sleep on her bed and she will lie down on the couch. But the Marquis grabs her hand and then claims that they are out of need and he will sleep on the sofa. The young lady says she can't allow that and then asks if they can sleep on the same bed. The girl says that the bed seems big and thinks that they will be comfortable, but the young man is a little embarrassed by this, after which they both lie down on the bed, but a little apart. The Marquis is a little shy. He thinks about how he can calm down because the girl has nothing against it and he shouldn't be selfish, after which he turns to the main character and says that it must be hard for her. The young lady remains silent, her expression sad. Then the boy looks at her and wonders if he should say something. The young man thinks what an idiot he is, but Nadia says that everything is fine now because she is there. And Winterfell is the most inaccessible place for her father, especially if something happens. Then Glenn will help her. Then the guy immediately jumps out of bed. And then he claims that he will definitely protect her. The young lady wonders what this means. And the guy claims that they are partners in any case, with a common goal, and while they are together, nothing should harm her, so the guy will protect her. The main character understands that she said that she doesn't love him, and that it's all a pretense, and the guy says that he will protect her. But even her blood relatives and people she trusted turned their backs on her and betrayed her. Nadia wonders why he says that. Meanwhile, the guy approaches the main character and hangs over her. He thinks that if the girl doesn't mind, then would it be greedy to ask her to stay? But at that very moment, a pillow blocks his path. The girl shyly asks if he minds if she just sits like this. The young lady thinks she shouldn't take advantage of such a good man or be around him. After all, the guy will definitely meet a worthy girl, even more worthy than her. The main character asks Glenn to forgive her, because if the girl's plan succeeds, she wants to leave Winterfell. Nadia adds in her mind that it's for him. Glenn is a little shocked by this, and then he smiles sadly, says that he understands, and heard the young lady, and then takes her hand. And kissing her, He affirms that no matter what happens, he will try to help her. The next day, the maid goes for a walk with her mistress. The main character says that warm weather can happen in the north too, and asks if maybe in such weather, all the flowers will bloom. But when the girl turns around, she doesn't see her maids, but only hears their cries about something sweet. When the young lady turns around, she sees the marquise there. The maids say the gentleman looks so brave. They say it's hot outside, and why is he dressed so warmly? The main character sighs. Now she understands why the maids wanted to take a walk so much, but the girls tell their mistress that their marquis is, after all, handsome. Risa asks if it's a big deal that his lordship won the annual fencing tournament with the best swordsman in the empire, and he even won the imperial archery tournament, so there is no other knight like him on the entire continent. Nadia thinks how cool this is, and how it perfectly explains the possibility of love at first sight. She thanks the guy for being so good. One of the maids says she heard that Mr. Li Jiho has been very popular in the south lately, but he still can't outdo their marquise, since Lord Jiho only wields a sword, while theirs is a master of both sword and bow. Risa says that's not all, and he's known for his battlefield savvy, and he's also taller. But then the young man comes up to them from behind and agrees, saying he really is taller. The maids are very frightened by this. The guy, smiling, adds that his shoulders are broader too. The main character laughs and asks what he's talking about, but the young man only looks at her and remembers how the girl said that she wanted to leave Winterfell. He thinks he said he heard Nadia, but he didn't say he would follow her words. He regrets everything he said to her, and it's driving him crazy because he's tired of her after her family betrayed her. Now he turns to the main character and says that if she has time, she would like to continue her archery training. He thinks that he is not going to let the young lady go, or even if he does not have the opportunity to turn back time, he will create a new opportunity to convince Nadia. Afterwards, they set off on horseback into the forest. The young lady, a little surprised, asks her husband why they're there. She thought he wanted to practice archery and doesn't understand why they're there. But the guy says the fastest way to improve is practice. The main character, shocked, says she can barely draw the bow and isn't even sure she'll hit the target. But the young man tells her not to worry, because he will keep a close eye on everything. After this, the main character asks where all the other knights are. She finds it strange because they came to such a remote place, so they need protection. The marquise, blushing a little, replies that the other knights have not yet finished their training, which is why he did not take them, but he understands that this was a lie. After all, a few hours ago, one of the knights asked if the master wanted to know how to change the lady's mind, and the other cried out whether this really meant that Nadia's feelings for him had cooled. But this was expected, so they repeatedly told the gentleman that he had to stop avoiding her feelings. The guy angrily replies that that's not the point. He thinks that he can't reveal Nadia's secret to them, so all he can do is keep quiet. Ward cries out for the master not to worry and to trust them, because they, the northern guys, always keep their word. The green-haired knight says that the guys from the south don't know anything and call the northerners incompetent in love, but they are very mistaken, and your knight says that recently the average aristocrat has been attracted to unreliable men like the northerners. They are already starting something like a lecture. The red-haired ward tells the master that now the Knight of Winterfell will conduct a special lesson for him. And to begin with, the Marquis should suggest that his wife practice archery in the forest without their presence. So now the guy is talking to his wife and saying that if something happens, he will protect her, so the girl shouldn't worry about security. After which, the young man suggests starting training for a real fight. This was the second step in the knight's plan, namely, to appear cool to the young lady. Glenn then draws his bowstring and says that game is roaming nearby. The protagonist is a little shocked by this, wondering why this happened so suddenly. And at this time, a monster emerges from the bushes. The knights had sent it in advance, and the Marquis finished it off with one blow. A young lady approaches Glenn and says she's heard he's the most accomplished archer in the Empire, but this really amazes her. The Marquis merely clears his throat sheepishly and asks if she'd like to try stringing a bow. The heroine says she wants to, but she must have left her bow on her horse. Then the young man hands her the bow from his hands. He claims that he made it especially for Nadia, but he himself understands that this was the third step in the knight's plan, namely, to prepare a special gift. Nadia thanks her husband and asks when he managed to do this, but she herself realizes that he is acting a bit strange today. The main character looks at him, but hears some noise behind the stone, and when she looks a little closer, she sees a piece of red hair there. Now, the young lady begins to understand what is happening. She assumes that the fact that they were left alone there, and the game suddenly appeared, was planned with the help of the knights. The two are sitting behind the rocks, and one of them says that it seems my lady liked the gift and everything is going according to plan. The girl recalls the gossip about northerners being inept at love, but this situation is so sweet. Then, the marquise points to one of the trees and invites the young lady to try shooting at its center. The brown-haired lady agrees and draws the bowstring, then releases the arrow, but she falls before reaching the tree, and the marquise says she's improved considerably. This was the fourth step in the knight's plan, in which Glenn was required to praise Nadia. But then he looks at his wife and realizes that something is wrong, because she has bowed her head. But the main character can't help but laugh. The guy asks why his wife is laughing. The young lady says she just wants to. But you think that at first the girl thought he was a really cold and scary person, but it turned out that he was just inexperienced in such things. After which, Nadia turns to her husband and says that he is very affectionate. The guy is a little embarrassed by these words, but a little while later, it starts to rain. The young lady looks up at the sky and asks Glenn if even the weather was part of his plans. He asks what she's talking about. And then he turns to Nadia and, a little embarrassed, wonders if she really figured it all out. After which he covers her with his cloak and says that there is an abandoned hut nearby, so they can stay there for a while until the rain subsides. The young lady agrees, and they head to that very hut in the middle of the forest. The marquise says that it seems the rain will not stop so easily, but they may still have to spend a considerable amount of time there. But after the young master looks at his wife, his face immediately turns red. The young lady is completely soaked from the rain. Glenn covers her with his cloak and asks if she's cold. The main character, in response to such actions, is a little embarrassed and thanks her husband, after which the young lady looks out the window and says it would be better if it snowed. The marquise doesn't understand why she suddenly wants snow, but then he says that, if you think about it, in the south, even in winter, there's hardly any snow. The young lady replies that this is true and that her childhood dream was to make a huge snowman, but it was never fulfilled because there wasn't enough snow. The marquise, however, says that in the north, the snow piles up chest, deep in winter, but he too hasn't made a snowman. The young man says that if the opportunity arises in the future, they should mold it together and make it huge. The girl thinks that she had a lot of different jobs the other day, but now she is having a good time listening to the sounds of the rain, and it seems that her soul is becoming calmer. The marquise says his wife can lie down when she's tired. The young lady, smiling, thinks the young man won't calm down, and then she puts her head on his shoulder. Glenn is a little embarrassed by this. A little while later, two knights are wandering through the forest. One of them says that he did not expect that the rain would start so suddenly, and because of it, they lost their master. But then they see a hut in the middle of the forest and decide to look there again. But after they go there, they see their master sleeping peacefully with his mistress, so the knights decide not to disturb them. A short time later, the protagonist is sitting at the table with her husband. The butler explains that there's been a rapid adoption of new agricultural tools, and that while surveying the lands, the feudal lord's initial reactions to the innovation were noticeable. The marquise claims that it was also said that the peasants who migrated to the new lands adapted well there, and it was all thanks to Nadia. The young lady says that she is grateful to the marquise for such words, but she certainly was not alone in all this. The main character thinks that lately everything has been like a dream, and her plans are calmly coming true. If you compare her current life with her past, everything is very peaceful and warm. Nadia wants time to stop at this moment, even though she knows that such a wish is quite selfish. But then the two exchange glances, and Glenn turns away in embarrassment. The main character just laughs in response to this, but suddenly the maid runs into the room and screams that she has an emergency message. And then he says monsters are attacking. The most important members of the Winterfell family gather at a round table. One of them claims that a couple of people have been injured in a village located along the northern divide, and the damage was reportedly not very significant. Another man says that, however, it will not be long before the swarms of monsters reach densely populated villages. Glenn asks if there's anything else to discuss, and if they should begin preparing for the expedition immediately. His charges say they'll set out immediately after preparations. Nadia asks her husband, what about testing a new weapon, so that on this trip it can be tested in a real fight? Giscard agrees with the lady's point of view, and says that, moreover, near the Yers mountain range, which is the goal of the expedition, no one will see it, and they will be able to keep this weapon secret. The marquis agrees, and then says that they will do just that. He says that they first need to clarify the nature of the area, but the young lady says she has one more thing to say. and then he asks if she can join the expedition. The guy is a little shocked by this question. One of the men sitting at the table says that girls have not yet taken part in the campaign against monsters, and it is too dangerous. The young lady understands that they are opposing more actively than expected, but she must definitely be on this expedition in order to successfully complete that matter. But then the Marquis only asks if there are reasons for refusal, and then looks at his wife, and he says that it is none other than Nadia, and if we remember the feats she has accomplished, then the girl has the greatest right to participate in this expedition. Glenn insists it won't be dangerous, because he'll be protecting his wife. Afterward, they head to the battlefield to fight the monsters. Incidents often occur when monsters living in the demon realm invade the human world through the gates. Since the cause is unknown and the invasion cannot be prevented, it is a disaster that must be responded to as quickly as possible. Glenn orders the attack and keeps his distance. After that, the archers begin firing at the monsters. The guy sitting on his horse says that, as expected, regular arrows don't work on them, and another knight asks if he can give the order to retreat. But the Marquis tells him to wait a little, and then, when he sees that the monsters are close enough, one shouts at the knights to retreat. Another knight tells the lord that everything is as he said. The monsters pursue the horse archers who are used as bait, and their formation is completely disorganized. The Marquis says that monsters are just a herd of fools with a large build, and it is not difficult to defeat them if you use your brains. After which, the guy takes his sword out of its sheath and says that he will try to hunt the mice driven into a corner, and orders the knights to attack. He plunges the monsters into eternal sleep one by one, while the main character watches from a cliff. Afterwards, the Knights of Winterfell are victorious. The young lady says that if that many monsters descended on their land, they would cause so much damage. The knight tells the lady not to worry, for they have a master within them, and this time they have won without a single casualty. He also says that having such a master in the north as theirs is a true joy. The protagonist agrees with Fabian, saying that Glenn is truly encouraging. She reflects that after their wedding, she often heard about Glenn's exploits from the warriors, but seeing it with her own eyes is even more astonishing. The girl thinks Glenn has fulfilled his role, and now it's her turn. The young lady tells the Marquis that she has something to say to him. The guy asks what it is, and Nadia answers that she wants to use the remains of the monsters to create a unique product that will only be produced in their area. The guy is a little shocked by this, and the other knights tell the lady that they tried to profit from this huge amount of leftovers every time they fought monsters. However, in reality, they are useless, and it is best to burn everything before it causes too much trouble. The young lady just smiles and asks, what if she knows how to profit from them? The two men are a little shocked, and the Marquis asks if Nadia could tell him how. He realizes the girl clearly has some kind of plan, since she's always helped Winterfell with her ingenuity. The main character says that the remains of monsters can be used as excellent medicinal material. Glenn says they asked their healer earlier, but he said there's nothing useful in monsters. The young lady claims it's because the method is unknown to the world, and she accidentally read about it in an ancient, forbidden book as a child. The guy asks if she wants to say again that the information she accidentally learned could be useful, and the main character agrees. The girl understands that their doubts are to be expected. She, too, knows this all comes from a past life. More precisely, you're in a war with demons that will begin in the future. It was observed and discovered that demons use parts of their own kind as medicine. The main character says that agricultural production is important, but for the long-term prosperity of their territory, other industries must also be developed, so trade must be revived. It is for this reason that turning the remains of monsters into a special commodity is a very important mission for Winterfell. The guy says that his wife is right, and if they manage to create this special commodity, it will become their reliable resource. The main character says she'll give an example and points to Medusa, a similar monster. She claims that even though he has no legs, he'll still be quite useful. The young lady says that the byproducts of the jellyfish can be used to make use of the snake venom that is in her hair, and in fact there is barely a noticeable difference between the medicine and the venom, so they can use it. But the main character doesn't have time to finish before a snake attacks her, and the girl is very scared by this. However, the Marquis immediately pulls her to him and decapitates the snake. He then asks if his wife is all right. The girl, a little scared, says that she is fine, and then asks how Glenn is. The guy just hugs her and says that it makes her happy and is such a relief, but suddenly he feels a sharp pain. Looking at his hand, he sees melted armor and is surprised. That same evening, the young lady approaches the knights. One of them says that it is all their fault, because before escorting the young lady, it was necessary to carefully check whether the monsters were dead. The main character tells the knights not to blame themselves, because it was she who made a mistake by recklessly going there. At this time, another man comes out of the tent and says that the area of the wound is extensive, but he does not think that the gentleman was poisoned, and this is a great blessing. But at night, his temperature may rise, so you need to call a nurse and apply a cold compress. Nadia says there is no need for a nurse because she will be with him personally. After which, the girl enters the room with the Duke. The guy asks if she's hurt. The main character says that she was a little scared, but otherwise everything is fine. But she claims that what is more important now is that Glenn suffered because of her. The Marquis says that snake monsters are tenacious, and even after the death of their bodies, they can remain alive, and it is their fault that they did not check him thoroughly. But the girl is not to blame for this, so she should not torment herself. The main character says that he even rushed to protect her without protective clothing. The girl argues that the Marquis needs to value his body a little more, since he is the head of the Winterfell family. The girl understands that he saved her despite the danger, and maybe in his eyes, the young lady looks like she is grumbling, but she is simply afraid for him. The young master claims that he is much more skilled than them in combat with magical beasts. He also made promises to his wife, the young lady, realizing that he was a knight, and perhaps that was the knightly mindset. The girl was close to a couple of knights. Fabian had a younger brother vibe. Lee Ji-ho was a trash who abandoned his fiancé to pursue his career, so the girl realizes she didn't notice their chivalrous mentality. After this, she turns to her husband and says that she wants to say something. When the young gentleman agrees, the girl says that he just sounded cool, and if she were a little more frivolous, she might have fallen in love with him. The guy's face immediately turns red from this, but then the main character says that, of course, she doesn't mean that she really fell in love with him, so he can rest assured. After which, the girl asks what is wrong with the Marquis's face, and he just turns around and wonders if the girl realizes what she just said. But the main character only says that it turns out she wasn't imagining it. She reaches her hand to his forehead, and she says that she was told that he could develop a fever because of the poison, and asks if that is really the reason. But then the young lady pulls away and says the boy's forehead is burning, after which she puts him back on the bed. And he says that today it would be better for him to go to bed early, and he can trust her to take care of the sick person. The Marquis thinks that after she said such things, how can he fall asleep peacefully right in front of her? But a little while later, he falls asleep. Nadia places her hand on his forehead. The girl says she was worried, but fortunately, the fever has subsided significantly. She recalls Glenn recently telling her it wouldn't be dangerous because he would protect her. The brown-haired lady thanks her husband for keeping his promise, and then she tenderly kisses him on the cheek. A short time after the monsters were eliminated, the Winterfell punitive force immediately returned, taking with them the remnants of the monsters. Now the Marquis extends his hand to help the young lady off the map. The protagonist takes his hand. And when he goes out, he's surprised to see it's already snowing. The young gentleman says it's slowly starting to get colder. The girl realizes that so much time has passed since her arrival in Winterfell. The Marquis says, "By the way, didn't she say she wanted to make a snowman?" Then he approaches her and says that he thinks they will be able to do it soon. The main character says that this is indeed true. One of the wards smirks and says that these two now look like real spouses, and the other says that their method of winning the mistress's heart worked. The butler then greets the main characters. The Marquis says Gordon has done a good job and asks if anything has happened while they were away. The butler says nothing out of the ordinary has happened, adding silently that this excludes the fact that his work has doubled due to his mistress's absence. He then says that Wayne, who had left the capital, has returned to their lands and said he wishes to see his mistress. The main character says that then she'll perhaps arrange their meeting. The girl thinks he's just in time and she has a favor to ask of him. After which, one man claims that most of the jewelry and works of art were sold at auctions for a total of 84,000 gold coins, excluding auction fees, and they can look up the details in the books and documents. The Marquis says he tried hard, and that it must have been difficult traveling to the capital and then back. The man replies that nothing of the sort happened, and that's just his job, since he also benefits when the brokerage commission is higher than usual. Then, the young lady turns to Wayne and asks if he could come to the capital again. The man asks what she's talking about and whether she's discovered another rare dragon. The young lady claims that this is not the case, and after the last attack of the monsters, they collected what was left of them, so she plans to create a special product from them and sell it. But for this process of work, several materials are needed. Wayne asks what she's talking about and if she's going to sell the monster scraps, since they're just waste that won't do any good. But Nadia only turns to her ward and asks him to fulfill her request. After which, Wayne apologizes and says he said too much. He thinks the lady can be trusted, as she always has a plan. The girl merely says that she's grateful for his work and is considering raising his salary for this trip to the capital. The man says that he will be incredibly grateful to her. He understands that, as expected, she has well-developed diplomatic skills. Wayne tells the lady he's brought a little thing he'd like to give her. The young lady says it's not worth it, and she's even ashamed that she's sending him back to the capital, and now he's given her a gift. But the man claims that this is his desire, and let her at least look once. Believe her, he will clearly be to her liking. The servant then opens the chest, revealing gold fabric. The man insists it's not easy to obtain, even for money, and this time he's been very lucky. The main character looks at the gift and says it's so precious. The girl realizes it's the same silk Karine couldn't get, which is why she tormented herself. Wayne simply says that as soon as he saw him, he thought he would suit my lady. So the man asks her to accept the gift as a token of his favor. The main character wants to object, but the marquise comes up to her from behind and says that this silk can be used to make a dress for the ball. And he believes she'll need it someday, so it's best for the young lady to accept it. One agrees, saying that a ball gown of fine silk would suit her perfectly. Afterwards, the man and his servant head off in a carriage. The black-haired man says he's interested in something, and Wayne asks what it is. Then the young man speaks of the silk from the Golden Forest. The young man claims he thought his mentor would give this item to his lordship or the elder lord, but he asks why he dedicated such a valuable item to the lady. And after these words, he only gets hit on the head. The man yells at him for being an idiot and asks what the boy is even learning under his wing. The young man says that if he made some mistake, he asks the teacher to let him know, and Wayne only asks who, in the young man's opinion, has the greatest power in these lands. The guy thinks for a moment and then says that, of course, the marquise comes first, the eldest gentleman comes second, and the lady comes third. Then the man says that this is wrong and that the mistress comes first. The young man asks what the teacher is talking about. He claims that the marquis is the head of the Winterfell family, but in reality, it's she who makes the decisions. Wayne says the young man is a merchant, but he doesn't even have that kind of savvy. Moreover, the man had been watching the marquis since childhood, but this was the first time he had such an expression on his face as today. The merchant realizes that their young master must have fallen in love for once. The next day, the maids admire the silk from the Golden Forest. Looking at him, one of them says that she thought she would see something like this in her entire life, and the second says that he is very handsome. The main character says the material is beautiful, but asks if it's too luxurious for her. After all, she didn't even mean to attack, so it's unlikely she could make a ball gown out of it. Risa recalls something and says that an invitation letter recently arrived from the royal family, as a banquet in honor of His Majesty's birthday is soon to be held. So the maid asks, how about Togo sewing a dress for the occasion? The main character agrees and says it will be wonderful. She believes she is powerless to resist the royal command, so she will have to travel to the capital in person for a while. But in that case, she will definitely have to see her family. The girl orders Risa to send someone to the tailor's and set a time for this week. The maid obeys. The main character thinks that there is no need to worry too much, because she is no longer the Nadia from the past. Then she sighs and decides to continue her postponed work, but her gaze suddenly falls on the egg. The girl turns to the maids. 3 maids immediately come closer to her and ask what happened. The main character insists she's talking about a dragon's egg and asks if there's a crack in it. The maids say it looks that way. And when the crack begins to widen, one of the maids screams that the dragon is really hatching. And another maid screams for my lady to move away, because it could be dangerous. Upon learning this news, the marquise immediately runs to his wife. He thinks he's been reckless. After all, I didn't think at all that the dragon egg could actually hatch, and if something dangerous happened, Nadia could get hurt. He immediately bursts into the room and cries out if the young lady is okay. The main character only looks at him calmly and asks if the guy has arrived. The young gentleman asks what she's holding in her hands. The main character is holding a baby dragon. The marquis says that no matter how you look at it, it's a dragon's baby. He asks if the egg has actually hatched. The young lady hugs the newly hatched dragon and smiles sincerely. The main character asks Glenn if there are monsters that protect people. He claims this is very rare, but usually a monster considers the creature they first meet after hatching to be their mother. The young lady smiles and says that it means this little dragon takes her for his mother. She then turns to her husband and asks what to name the baby and if Glenn has any idea. The young man asks, why not just call him a dragon? Nadia refuses, suggesting they drop such titles, lest he become the guardian dragon of these lands in the future. The guy says that he doesn't even know whether he will become a guardian dragon or a disaster. It's all a matter of time. But when he reaches out to the dragon, it becomes wary. Glenn, still alive, continues to speak and asserts that, although the baby is a dragon, it still has some monstrous traits. But the black baby only bites the Marquise on the hand, causing him to scream. The main character is surprised and asks if he's okay. He tells her not to worry, as he doesn't think there's a wound left. The young lady looks seriously at the dragon and tells him to listen, and then asks how he can attack people, and says that if he behaves like that, she will not be able to raise him. The girl claims that she will have nothing to say if the rumors immediately kick him out of there for attacking their master. The little boy just looks at the young lady with sad eyes. The head coach says that making such pretty eyes won't help. The Marquis is a little embarrassed. He thinks that everything about his wife seems sweet. But the young lady then turns to him and asks, what about Noah? And then she adds that this will be the name of this baby. A little while later, the main character is already walking around the garden and looking for her little dragon. The girl wonders where he disappeared to again, and he is probably interested in everything since the baby was born not long ago. The first place the main character visits is the kitchen. One of the maids asks what her ladyship's business is. The young woman said she thought Noah would be there. She'd recently read a book about dragons and learned that young dragons tend to consider enclosed spaces safe, and they need to eat a lot to grow. So Nadia went into the kitchen, and suddenly she heard some rustling. It comes from the door in the locker, so the main character goes up to it and opens it. And inside, he sees a little dragon who is gobbling up cookies with all his might. The main character picks him up and says that he is such a brat because the baby should have asked her for food if he was hungry. The dragon just looks at her innocently, and the brown-haired lady thinks how cute it is. The maid says that, by the way, the master also often looked there as a child. The young lady asks if this is true about the maids, and he says yes, and he did so at the height of his growth. The boy grew every night, and even after eating, he remained hungry, so whenever he could find a convenient opportunity, he would always run to the kitchen. Nadia says it's surprising that such a cold-blooded Glenn had such a period. She thinks that perhaps he was so sweet. And then he says that the little dragon looks like Glenn, in response to which the baby only smiles. A short time later, the protagonist is sitting over documents. The Marquise claims that the child has been wandering around lately, turning the entire mansion upside down, and asks if this is true. The young lady just smiles. She was constantly trying to find the missing Noah. One of the servants asked why my lady was there, but the girl was only looking for the baby. A little while later, the dragon hid again, and at this time, already in the garden, the gardener asked why my lady had come to such an untidy place. Now Nadia says that Noah is just very curious, and besides, he hasn't done anything serious yet, and he also listens to her well. The Marquis looks at these two and thinks that maybe the little dragon is simply doing what he listens to. But the thing is, he's a hindrance to his and Nadia's relationship. He places the paper on the table and says he thinks he'll have to be separated from this cub for a while. The main character picks up the piece of paper and asks what it is, and the Marquis says it's an invitation letter sent by the royal family. He assumes it's in honor of the king's birthday, and that they need to prepare for their move to the capital. The young lady is not very happy about this news. She thinks that everything is as expected. Glenn asks if her plans to create a cure from monster remains are still in place. Nadia says that, of course they are, and that their effectiveness has already been proven, so she plans to start selling them in the capital. The girl asks if he still doesn't believe it, and her husband says that it's not that, and he's just a little worried, because as she knows, nobles don't often engage in trade, so such people are usually looked down upon. Nadia asks Glenn if he's worried about being neglected in the capital. She thanks him for his concern, but says she has everything planned out, so he shouldn't worry. He'll see and understand everything for himself. The guy says that he will tell her just in case that if everything doesn't turn out as she expected, then he asks her not to torture herself, because in their family, no one would dare blame her. The young lady agrees, wondering if Glenn has really become so affectionate. She can't believe he's the same man she saw when they first met. She also asks her husband not to worry about her, and then looks at him. And she claims that they must continue to accumulate strength, because from now on, she decides to start taking active actions. That same evening, Lee Ji-ho also receives a letter, a video of him smiling, because he will soon be able to see Nadia again,